Call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Budget Committee meeting this evening. I don't believe we have any public comment. All right, great. So we'll skip that portion of our agenda. I do want to let you know that Councillor Surratt and Garrett are on the phone with us, and we'll check in with them periodically throughout the meeting. Or I think they're on the phone. Are you two there?
I'm here.
Great. Great. All right, and at this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to the mayor for an announcement.
Yes, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to announce, in case you haven't heard, that Councillor Poling has decided to resign from his role as City Councilor effective April 10th. He's been in public service, he said, for 45 years, 15 of those years, I think, on the City Council. So he has put in his time. He said he would like to enjoy his retirement with his wife while he's still healthy enough to do so. So we honor him. We will find ways to honor him in the future and thank him formally for his service. But he's been a really, he's been a great role model for many councilors for his leadership and his very deliberative, disciplined approach to his work, hard-working councilor. So we thank Councillor Poling. He decided not to come today, and we'll go through a process to find a replacement for him in that ward. Did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, after our meeting today at lunch, I'd forgotten the fact that the man was a United States Marine for several years, too, so it's actually more than 45 years of public service.
Yeah. So that's the announcement. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll move on to minutes approval. In your packet, there are minutes from the March 9th meeting. Are there any recommended changes or comments? And if not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll move approval.
Second?
Great. All in favor, please raise your hand. All right, any opposed? Great.
And I vote yes.
Thanks. And Garrett? Great. So Councillor Surratt and Garrett also voted yes. Right. And with that, I'll turn the meeting over to city staff. We're going to start off with a presentation about, it's titled Safe Community on our agenda.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. Christy and I are going to make a presentation tonight on a couple of things, or you'll see presentations on a couple of things. First is on Safe Community, our community justice system that we have here in Eugene, all the aspects of that we access in order to improve safety here. And then you'll also receive a presentation on our focused efforts that begin soon on downtown parks and nearby neighborhoods. So to begin with, I got the controller.
You're driving. Here's some water if you want it.
Okay, thank you. Are we sharing this?
Yeah. Just only put your lips on one side.
Okay, this got more interesting than I thought it would. Dry community justice system presentation. So in 2010, the City Council, together with input from the executive team, developed these priorities for a safe community. We have a high property crime rate in Eugene, higher than most communities our size. We're in about the 80th percentile when we examine it compared to other American cities. We want to create a greater sense of safety here, not just in all neighborhoods, particularly in the downtown. That's not a new interest for Eugene. And these last two bullets are tied to the interest of improving trust between our community and our police department. And so these are the things that we always come back to when we think about what enhancements or what changes we want to make to our community justice system. So to begin with, just the fundamental purposes of a police department in any community is, number one, above all else, is to respond to emergencies. And so we deploy our police officers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with an appreciation for the call load so that we have enough officers to deal with emergencies 24 hours a day. So we have fewer in the middle of the night when there are fewer emergencies, more officers in the middle of the day when we have more emergencies, and also when there's a higher workload. And then we investigate serious offenses. We have, over the last 20 years or so, we've balanced the workforce between patrol and investigations to ensure that we have, based on our workforce and the workload, the right number of detectives investigating persons crimes or violent crimes. Property crimes is our second largest investigative unit. We have an intelligence unit, and we have the ability to address major incidents or major events. So we work closely with the University of Oregon, for instance, for the large events that happen over there. They don't have the police staffing in order to provide security for things that occur there. When a presidential candidate visits, we prepare for that. If there's an incident that requires a SWAT team or the explosive disposal unit or a crowd control team, then we have the ability to deal with that. So those are the major incidents that we deal with. We invest what we can in crime prevention, because we know that for every crime that we prevent by educating a neighborhood about how not to be the victim of a property crime, for instance, that's a crime we don't have to respond to, and it's a crime we don't have to investigate, and it's a loss that that resident doesn't have to take. And then we use, and this is really what most of the presentation today is about, we use problem solving in order to reduce crime, improve safety, where we know that there are chronic and repeated crimes or antisocial behaviors that can be changed through environment or education or the criminal justice system. So the safety in Eugene, whenever I talk about this, I have to remind myself that this is a safe community to live in, but my career hasn't been focused on what's safe about the community. It's all been focused on what's not safe about the community. So as I go through this, just keep reminding yourself that this is a safe place to live. But that isn't what I think about. I think about what's not safe. And most of the crime that, most of the work that we do is in those top 5 bullets there. And a great deal of that is driven by drug and alcohol addiction. We have, Lane County has had a problem with methamphetamine for 50 years probably, and that's driven a great deal of our property crime for a long time. More recently, addiction to opioids, pharmaceuticals, has caused people to go to heroin, an illicit drug, and that's driven a great deal of our property crime recently. So that's what that's the nature of property crime in Eugene: stolen cars, thefts from cars, burglaries, and those types of things. Violent crime in Eugene is relatively low, so we're in about the 80th percentile for mid-sized cities. For property crime, we're in about the 30th or lower percentile for violent crime. What we've seen since 2008 is a slight increase in some violent crime, particularly simple assault. And some of that that we see in our mapping appears to be related to domestic violence. A great deal of it might be related to the chronically homeless population that lives in open spaces. And then we aren't able to staff much toward the management of drug sales. We have one detective assigned to the interagency narcotics enforcement team at the moment. That's a countywide team. That's a tough crime to measure. There aren't many metrics accessible to us to know what the volume of drug crime is. The two that some communities use, and we've used them here, are emergency room admissions and drug overdose fatalities. There hasn't been any radical change in either of those, to my knowledge, in the last 10 years or so, so my guess is that our illicit drug trade has probably been fairly constant. Much of the country has seen a radical increase in drug overdose deaths, but the drugs that are causing those aren't prevalent in Oregon yet, and I hope that isn't a problem that we have to face here. Human trafficking has also been sort of a constant here. The I-5 corridor enables that market, and young men and women get into that lifestyle here, and it's dangerous. It's unfortunate. We only have one detective that's able to focus part of his time to that, and he works closely also with federal agencies, because that's often interstate crime. Now, we can have we can have a pattern of burglaries in a neighborhood, and I won't get a single call on my desk phone complaining about all the burglaries in a neighborhood, but someone pitches a couple tents, and I get a lot of complaints. And the reality is that the antisocial behavior and the quality of life offenses that we see downtown, in parks, and in the neighborhoods near those areas significantly affect the way that we feel about our sense of safety. And a great deal of it is unsafe. When we put the people in jail that commit those top 5 offenses, they're pretty manageable inmates. When we put people in jail who commit that second to last offense there, those quality of life offenses, those are very difficult inmates for the jail to manage, because most of them have drug or alcohol addictions or severe mental health conditions. So our patrol officers also spend a considerable amount of their time responding to incidents involving people in mental health crisis. And Cahoots has been able, with the expansion of Cahoots over the last number of years, they've been able to address many of those calls for us. Police used to go to those, now Cahoots handles them, but those that are pretty dangerous we still go to, and it's a big part of our workload. So just remember, we have a safe community here. These are just the things that I think about. So these are the components of a healthy criminal justice system. In Eugene, if you start on the far left, we have cases that we try in federal court, in state court, and in the municipal court system. We work together with the Sheriff's Office, the Springfield Police Department, the FBI, the DEA, the IRS. There's a whole host of law enforcement agencies that we work together with in order to manage the crime issues that we see here. We also work with the courts, our prosecutors, and our crime prevention unit to educate the community in ways that will reduce crime. And we have a good array of meaningful sanctions. The municipal court has a mental health court. In state court, we have mental health court, veterans court, a homeless court, and a drug court. We also have taken advantage of the grants available to the prosecutor's office and our state and our parole and probation office to reduce recidivism among property offenders with intense supervision locally. So rather than sending people to prison, which we did a great deal in the previous 5 years, in the last 5 years we've used those funds available to counties, taken advantage of that to reduce recidivism to a point that's better than most counties in Oregon. Our DA's office has done, and our parole and probation office have done a very good job there. And then what the best example we have for working closely with social services is the Cahoots contract we have with Whitebird. That's pretty unique. There aren't many places that have that type of service. We're fortunate to have it here. So the staffing we have in the police department, I think you'll learn a little bit more about the other components of the municipal court system, is not adequate to the workload that we have. Our calls for service over the last 10 years have increased considerably. The most conservative estimate, because we're using a different tracking system now than we did then, conservative estimate is that our calls for service have gone up 40%. More realistically, it's probably more than 60%. We have increased the size of the downtown team, but the patrol workforce that handles the bulk of the calls for service hasn't grown substantially, and yet our calls for service, or our demand, has gone up quite a bit. So some of the implications of that are that our response times to low priority non-emergency calls, crimes that have happened earlier, is slow, and it's getting slower over time. We don't have enough call takers and dispatchers. It's pretty intense work in there. The turnover rate for probationary employees in our call center ranges from 50 to 85%. That's the turnover rate. So we could use another 6 authorized positions in there to help with that. Our evidence control unit hasn't had enough employees, and it led to significant management of the property and evidence that we have there some time back. And we know 2 additional employees would make a difference, and those are just the types of effects we've had. So when you have a lean system, you find different solutions. So we have, rather than arresting our way through problems, we found different ways to go about it. And as an example, the West University neighborhood has two types of crime problems. One is loud and disorderly parties. You might have heard about those. And also and it has a high property crime rate. One of the highest in the city is in that little West University neighborhood. It is high there because something like 99% of the residents there don't own their own home. They're students for the most part, and they may not be as cautious with their belongings as other people are, locking their doors and windows on hot days. So a lot of things are stolen from apartments in the West University neighborhood, and we know that situation spikes during the spring and winter breaks. So we've learned that if we intensely patrol that neighborhood during spring and winter breaks, we don't see that spike. And if we intensely provide crime prevention in the weeks before spring and winter breaks, there's less of a crime problem during that time. Well, that's a much better use of our time than responding to calls, responding to thefts and burglaries. And so you get the idea. The other thing that happens there is the loud and disorderly parties. So in the 80s and the 90s, we'd go to 6 or 7 riots in Westview every year, drunken riots. And so a slightly different patrol presence, enforcement presence, and work together with the University of Oregon to add that misbehavior to the student code. The city council passed an ordinance that made a big difference, and we haven't had a riot. I shouldn't even be saying this out loud, but we haven't had that kind of a problem since 2010, and even then it was starting to decline. So what the City Council has done is invest pretty heavily in a few areas. We increased the size of the downtown team from 2 to 9 officers, a sergeant and a CSO. We have one-time funding over 2 years to increase the numbers in the evidence control unit, and that's helped us quite a bit. In 2010, the council added 10 jail beds. That's no small cost. We've increased the size of our CAHOOTS contract twice now, once in 2010 and then last year. We now have 24/7 service. All those things help to reduce the workload on the police department. In order to balance out the community justice system, we added a prosecutor so that we don't have that bottleneck of work that occurs there. And we've implemented quite a number of different technology solutions throughout the entire system that have improved the way that we manage our data. So I'll pass it off.
I'm driving now?
Yeah,
Okay.
you've got it. And this, you can have the water too.
Oh, excellent. It's all new, okay. So we're going to shift a little bit. The chief spent a lot of time talking about the macro level, kind of the big components of the systems and how that the police department works with those systems. But I'm going to shift really to the municipal portion of the work that we do. One of the things that you've heard a lot about is or maybe have heard a lot about, some of you in this room have heard us talk about this before, is the Community Justice Initiative. And basically what that is the group of the core components of our municipal system coming together and saying, you know what, our traditional ways of doing business are no longer working for us. We need to find new strategies and new ways to have greater off-ramps, take an individualized approach to actually help people rebound and get back on their feet and use the services that we have available in the community. And so a team of, and I'll talk a little bit, actually I'll refer you to your handout. So one of the things that you have in your packet before you is a handout that talks about the community justice system. On this handout it talks about the core components, which are police, justice system, prosecutor, other defense attorneys, judges, and social service providers. And so what we did is we got together a couple of years ago and said, it's got to be a better way. And we developed 7 core system objectives, and you'll see them. And I apologize to Claire and Garrett. I just realized that you probably didn't get those ahead of time, so we'll make sure that you get them. The 7 core objectives that are on this page here are to implement community-based problem solving and restoration and restorative justice, reduce crime and recidivism to minimize impact of repeat customers, provide individualized treatment for community members, ensure high system cooperation and compatibility, strive for quick, swift resolution of cases, involve, listen, and build trust. You heard the chief talk about this a little bit earlier. Involve, listen, and build trust in the community and including the victims. I think that's a really key component that sometimes it's
we need to recognize there are often two sides and people that we need to be supporting. And work for system adaptability and the ability to reevaluate and adjust as needed. What we realize is that sometimes our system isn't as nimble as it needs to be, and we need to make quick course corrections to address the problems that our community is facing. And so what we have said is we want to really work and strive for ways to be able to do that as a system and not just individual components of the system. So one of the things that's important to point out is that any changes to the community justice system are supported by data that offers evidence of whether the proposed changes will result in better public safety outcomes. You hear the police chief talk a lot about data-led policing, but we really want to use data to help us plan for the future. What is it that we need to be focused on, and making sure that we're achieving the outcomes that we're setting out to achieve. Additionally, it's important to ensure that any proposed system enhancements will take advantage of the growing body of criminal justice research that offers evidence-based insights into reducing crime and recidivism. For example, there's a growing amount of research indicating that jail time may not be an appropriate sanction for many offenders, especially first-time offenders that are committing nonviolent crimes, which may seem counterintuitive to the desire to get offenders off the streets and into jail beds. And there's a lot of research around that. Recently, the chief and I met with representatives from the Lane County Adult Corrections, and they've changed a lot of their practices to take that into account. And so they're not holding offenders longer than need be because they understand the long-term implications of doing that. So as I mentioned, one of the things that we've been striving for is to look for a series of off-ramps so that there are fewer touch points in the system and there are fewer people that are actually going through the traditional system, because we're trying to find, again, the individualized approach to helping people. One of the things that you'll notice is at the bottom, there are 3 different paths that reflect some of those different off-ramps that we have available. The first one is the one that Chief talked about, is the Cahoots vehicle. So at any point in time, somebody may need assistance on the street, but they're not necessarily committing a crime or being charged with anything. They just need assistance. And so this provides us with one of the first off-ramps. And there are others, but I'm just kind of using these as examples. The next one is the court program. The chief talked a little bit about that as well. And again, it's that early intervention on the street involving a police officer and a social worker to provide a first point of contact to getting them connected to services. And then the community court, and I'll talk a little bit about this, but one of the things that I want to point out about the community court is that it isn't required that you are cited into community court. So a lot of times police officers will have contact with people and they'll say, you know what, do you know about community court? There's going to be a session on Friday, and they recognize there's a wide array of services that would avail themselves to people that are in need of assistance. And so I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So the next component is just, it is a reiteration of what you have on the handout, which really talks about the system components, kind of how things often launch. The chief talked about crime prevention and education and calls for service and kind of the different paths that those things take. And I also mentioned the key components, the core services that are reflected in the community justice system that we've been working with. The one thing that I would also like to be noted is that the city's community justice system works really closely in conjunction with Lane County Criminal Justice System, which handles felonies and misdemeanors cited into Lane County Circuit Court rather than into Eugene Municipal Court. And the chief talked about that a little bit. Similarly, local social service providers are a critical, absolutely critical part of our overall system. The chief mentioned that in the contact that they have in helping having those early intervention opportunities. But there's also addressing the underlying conditions that cause members of our community to commit crime, meaning that they sometimes have lack of housing, there's mental health related issues, and the chief spoke to some of the substance abuse related issues as well. In addition, investment in programs such as Teen Court and the city's commitment to investing in programs in support of youth and early literacy are equally important in preventing crime. Although this presentation is more focused on traditional service components, it is important to note that early intervention is an important part of changing the trajectory. So if you help kind of create a good foundation, you're less likely to have an impact on the criminal justice system in the future. So when the team got together, one of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about are what are the challenges that we're facing, what are the common problems that we share. We spent a lot of time talking about the high rates of property and behavioral crime, insufficient non-jail sanctions, which we've worked to address, high volume of cases and case backlog. And what that means is that the number of cases that were hitting the system were beyond the system's capacity to manage and flow through in a timely manner. And the reason that's important to manage cases in a timely manner is because delay in justice and the adjudication of cases is really justice denied. People forget about the incident that led to the arrest or to the citation oftentimes, and sometimes there's often such a lag time between when the cite happens and when a court session is scheduled that people forget and they don't show up. And a lot of the people that the system is serving they don't have a lot of resources to help keep them informed about when they need to appear for court, especially if it's far out. So what ends up happening is a lot of those people end up getting what we call a failure to appear warrant or failure to comply with some part of their service. So they end up cycling through the system quite often, and they end up impacting our police department pretty significantly. The minimum cost, we've done some cost estimating on that, and when we have a high volume of failure to appear, the cost of the system is a minimum of $375,000 a year. And the vast majority, and that's in capacity, so that's time that is spent rearresting people that have failed to show up and kind of taking them through the whole cycle. And many times people go through that cycle several times. And one of the things to note about that is that we're working really hard to figure out a way to minimize the number of warrants and by having more of those off-ramps available so that people can be successful in moving through the system, because there is a real cost to the capacity of the system when we're addressing failure to appears. The next handout that I wanted to draw your attention to is jail bed usage, and so there's been a lot of discussion about that, I would say, over the course of the last year. And one of the things that I would want to point out is that we talk a lot about whether or not there's enough capacity, and in some cases refer to what sort of capacity are we paying for at the City of Eugene. One of the things I would want to share is that the Lane County Jail currently has about 317 beds. We lease 15 beds, which is less than 5% of their capacity. That other capacity is used also for Eugene police arrests. So a number of the people that are arrested and cited into jail are circuit court offenders or have state-related crimes. And so the jail bed capacity, that broader jail bed capacity that we don't pay for, is also used to support our municipal, our Eugene Police Department. So the handout that I provided to you kind of gives you a comparison between the two different systems that we have available to us. One is the Lane County jail bed space, and the other is the Springfield jail bed space. This gives you the number of beds that we're able to purchase, the cost per bed per day, and then the annual cost for those spaces. At the City of Springfield, we generally only have people housed at the City of Springfield when they're sentenced offenders. And there's specific criteria about who we can send over to the City of Springfield. And right now, it's basically healthy males. The City of Springfield is looking at expanding to include female inmates. I think that's happening sometime in the next couple of months. I'm not sure how that will help in terms of the capacity usage that we have. But one of the things I really want to draw your attention to is the programs and services. And so Lane County has a broad array of services that we can take advantage of in terms of supporting our inmates and their success in moving through the system. They have mental health treatment, substance abuse counseling, alternative sanctions such as work crew, residential reentry center, substance abuse counseling, workforce readiness programs, and community service. And one of the things that was noted when we met with Lane County Adult Corrections staff a couple of weeks ago is that they have a significant interest in working with municipal offenders. They recognize that there's a high need for services, and they're continuing to want to work with us to make sure that the programs and the services that they're providing help in working with our offenders. The other thing that is on this spreadsheet, or this handout for you, is jail releases. There's a lot of talk in the community about the number of what they refer to as capacity-based releases. And what that means is that when the jail is full, completely full at 317, they have to start releasing people. And in our case, so these capacity-based releases that are referred to on the handout refer to our beds. And as you can see, that most of the releases that are happening are occurring on the weekends, and because there's increased levels of activity. One of the things that Lane County Jail does is that there are times when they're not at capacity where we're able to actually expand our capacity, and they will be willing to house more additional municipal offenders when they have available space. And so we really appreciate the partnership that we have with them to optimize all of the jail beds that are available. But one of the things to note is that, like I said, it's mostly happening on weekend, and this is for the course of a month, so there's about 40 that are happening, but these are specific to the leased jail beds at Lane County Adult Corrections for a 3-month period. So just to give you some context about that. Moving on. So one of the couple other system challenges that we talked about were the insufficient access to social services and low-income housing. The low-income housing access continues to be a challenge even for some of our program areas. And then changing public safety landscape downtown. The chief's noted quite a bit about that, so I'll keep moving. Some of the system improvements the chief's already talked about, the city prosecutor's office, and I can tell you that when the justice team started meeting, when the Justice Initiative core group started meeting, their #1 priority across the board from police and judges and attorneys was the city prosecutor's office capacity. That became a huge bottleneck in the processing of cases and how we were actually able to manage them. And there has been investment in the city prosecutor's office to increase the number of city prosecutors to a level that they've been able to sufficiently make changes. We also spent a lot of time looking at our overall case process to make sure that we were as efficient as we possibly could be. We spent a lot of time looking at our docketing practices and how the cases flow throughout the system, and we were able to reduce the backlog of cases. I talked a little bit about the jail bed capacity, so I won't. We've done a lot of work around the utilization of our bed space. And then we've created a couple of new programs which are basically off-ramps, and talked a little bit about those already. One is the court and the other is community court. Let's see. So the community court launched in late 2016, which was, I believe we started in September. We received a $200,000 grant, and then we've also used some one-time city funds to implement the program. There's a 2-year funding plan. It's a pilot program at this point. 223 individuals have moved through the program. And what you'll notice, you'll say, if you're looking at the chart, you'll say, well, that doesn't add up to 223. And it actually adds up, I believe, to 81. But that's because of what I mentioned earlier, is that the community court doesn't require that you have a citation to move through the program. There is a high value in people having access to the services that are available. And so you can see that the capacity is quite different when you include that. Chief, you drive it down.
Oops, excuse me. The community court, the community outreach and response team is a perfect example of the kind of thing that we would expand in. This was a very narrow pilot project, and the concept, which was developed by our downtown sergeant and bike team, Sergeant Julie Smith, is that you identify the highest utilizers of certain services. The highest utilizers of municipal court, for instance, are often the highest utilizers of the emergency room or the emergency medical system or the Buckley House or other emergency type of housing services. And identify those folks and ask ourselves what sort of services could we dial into their lives so that they aren't in need of municipal court services, for instance, or jail services, and instead they're living in a better place. Have a better living situation. So the great value of this is that if one person is taken off the street and is instead living in a different type of housing situation, and we're not arresting them 50 times a year, that's 50 times they're not using up a jail bed. That's probably many more times they're not using our emergency medical system, more times they're not in the municipal court. It's not saving real dollars, it's creating capacity in all those places that could be used in a different way. So that's a great example of the kind of experiments that we've been conducting over the last few years. So what we want to do next is we want to continue to focus on downtown parks and nearby neighborhoods. The safety and the feeling of safety in those places is probably one of the greatest concerns that we have right now. We'll continue to maintain the staffing in the prosecutor's office because that's pretty critical to the smooth flow of work. We'll continue with the community court, but probably the next major undertaking that will start soon is to take a comprehensive look at all of the systems. We've done some of that within the police department, but we need to do it in the other components of the community justice system and ask, if we're to invest someplace, where would we begin in order to keep the system balanced as it grows, in order to meet the needs of the community in the most ideal ways. That's it. Oh, any questions?
All right. We have Councilor Clark and then Josh.
Thank you both for both the report and for all of your hard work. This is the tough stuff in city government, or a lot of it, and I admire the hard work that both of you put in. You mentioned, Christy, that the great expense and the impact on the system that that failure to appear creates. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me the failure to appear rate in Lane County, City of Eugene?
I don't know what the rate is. I know that when they conducted the study, I think they were looking at 2,000 different warrants for the period of time that the consultant helped us take a look at the impact to the system of failure to appear rates, but I don't know what the percentage is.
Chief, do you know what it is?
No, I don't.
I had the sheriff tell me it was 43%. You think that sounds about right?
It could be, yeah.
So we write a citation for the stuff we don't arrest people for, whatever it is, whether it's illegal camping or whether it's a behavioral thing, or usually it's some manner of the fifth item you mentioned on that first list, behavioral issues. We'll write a citation. I have heard cryptically from folks, officers downtown even. There are times when they've seen somebody get a citation, wad it up, throw it at the officer. Just not be done with, just don't care. And when nearly half of people who get citations don't even show up for court, I wonder, there's a period of time between the time somebody's arrested, for example, and the time that they're going to have a hearing, and we have a capacity problem. And so what would you say is the percentage of people who are released for whatever reason before their hearing, before trial?
Well, those releases are probably not happening as much during the week as they are on the weekends, is my guess, based on...
What I'm asking is, of all people arrested, how many of them are released before their court date?
Before their trial, is that what you asked?
Yes.
Well, everybody who's arrested is arraigned. Unless the jail doesn't have enough room for them, then they're released early. What you see from the chart is the rate at which people are released before arraignment. Probably almost every defendant is released before trial. It's
When you
rare to
hear someone...
We're talking about municipal court offenses here.
When you hear someone quote the words pretrial release, are they, as it's commonly understood, as an officer might use that, pretrial release, are they talking about pre-arraignment release or pre-trial for their offense?
Yeah, the way it works is that we arrest somebody for a municipal crime, we lodge them in the jail, and then within 24 hours on weekdays, I think it's between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., there's an arraignment. A judge goes over to the jail, and they have a process over there with a prosecuting attorney, a defense attorney, and all the municipal defendants that are in jail. And the judge makes a decision at that point whether they should be held over for trial. Typically, they are not held over for trial.
So, as the judge works for the council, I can't see the clock, by the way. I'm trying to moderate my time here, but I can't see where the clock is.
You have about a minute.
As the judge works for the council, would it be accurate to say that his decision-making curve on who shouldn't be released is is a point at which he should probably have a conversation with council. He's probably subject to their input on that issue.
Can I?
Maybe the city attorney should answer this question. I'm getting to a final point here, but I'm asking some tough questions for you.
You want to hand?
So a judge must be independent when the judge is operating in a judicial capacity. So it would not be appropriate for the council to instruct the judge as to how the judge should be exercising that judicial decision-making. There are certain constitutional issues that the judge has to take into account when the judge is deciding whether to hold someone over for trial or not. If, for example, and I don't believe this is the case, but if, for example, the judge was making a decision to release whatever the percentage is of the people that are being released solely because there was not sufficient jail space to hold somebody, then the council could say, oh, well, in light of that, we want to appropriate X number of dollars to make sure that.
I got the solutions. I'm getting there. I'm just saying, what's our appropriate role with the judge? What can we and can't we direct the judge to do?
I would need to do a little research and get back to you as to exactly where those limits are, but there are certainly significant limits on what the council can do in instructing a judge in determining when the judge should release or hold somebody.
Would I, and thank you very much, sir, the question then I would have is, would you characterize most of the pretrial releases as based on the judge's discretion, or they're capacity-based releases?
I don't know what the numbers are. The judge plays very little role in the capacity-based releases. That's just a question of whether or not there's enough beds to hold the people that we have in there.
So are most of them happening, though, I'm saying because of the way the judge interacts with and the manner of cases he's seeing, or would you say most pretrial releases are capacity-based?
I don't know.
I don't think they're necessary. We can get more info. I think that we need to get you a really clear answer about the decisions and how they're making that, for sure. And so,
with my last couple of seconds, I will say that what I keep hearing is that our greatest problem with repeat offenders downtown is that we have a lack of capacity, and if we could just hold people sufficiently before they're pretrial released, we would have much less of a problem downtown. I'm trying to drill down and find the specific facts that support or oppose that notion, and I could use your help with that.
I just want to make sure clarity. So is your question that somebody who gets arrested and doesn't spend any time in jail post arraignment, are they not spending time in jail because the judge has said you don't need to spend time in jail, or the judge says you need to spend time in jail but there's actually not a bed in jail for them to spend time in?
I'm trying to figure out where I see the system as broken, because we have people doing repeat offenses, the same folks. We have people half the time who don't show up for court, literally, and we need to enhance the system and give it greater strength. And I'm trying to determine the specific pieces that need fixing, because I hear the good work that you're doing, but my job sitting on the budget committee and on council is to say, what do we need to get from here to there, and what should I be supporting with?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we have clarity on what the information you're looking for, so we can make sure we get you back the information you need. So,
excellent, thank you.
And Mike, also, when we get that information back to you, part of what we'll try to clarify for you is what Christy and the chief were talking about, the difference between people who are arrested for basically the circuit court, people who are arrested for municipal court. And remember, lots of the people who are cited, they're being cited for violations which could not justify being arrested for. So there are a number of people who aren't showing up, but we couldn't arrest them anyway. Prohibited camping, as an example, that's a citation. So when we get the information back to you, I understand what you're asking, and so we'll try to make sure we get you sufficient information so you know those things where adding jail beds, for example, could make a difference, and those things where it could not.
Well, with my last 14 seconds, I will say that I appreciate your work. I appreciate what you said. I heard you say that some of our issues in this regard are due to a lack of services available. I heard you say some of the behaviors are caused by a lack of services. And I would differ with that opinion. And so
I don't recall saying that. I mean, if you could
you
give me.
said some of these crimes are caused by a lack of services. Those were your words.
Well, if I said that, I don't think it's what I intended
Okay.
to say.
Okay.
Josh.
Also, thank you. I really appreciate the clarity and the breadth of all of this, and it's helpful to be able to carry these things back to the community. I would ask that we just make sure that these make it into the Budget Committee materials. They weren't in the packet. These are extremely helpful. So, two questions for now. One about cahoots, and the other about police use of force. First on cahoots, and really this is only partly about cahoots. It's more about the discussion that we had about the increase in cahoots funding at the Budget Committee last year. We talked a little bit about how part of the expectation of a program like cahoots, when it's well run and well integrated with the rest of police responsibilities, is that ultimately it should save us some money and end up with better outcomes for people in the community. And we talked a little bit about, but didn't actually settle on, any specific metrics for that. And I guess I don't know if this is something that we can put in this year, or if it's something you have some quick answers on, or something we can get. But part of the frame for our discussion of increasing cahoots funding was the sense that either it would save money, or it would just, for the same total amount of money, get us better outcomes. And so it would be helpful if we could work toward that in the future. I guess it's kind of obvious, but I'll just say this very, very specifically. At some point, maybe we should increase cahoots funding. At some point, we should probably no longer increase cahoots funding. Either we should put funding into one of the areas here that you mentioned, or into some other new effort. But without some metrics to drive that, it's difficult to have that discussion at the Budget Committee. So that would be great. Second point, just quickly, it feels a little bit, I really appreciate the discussion of the outcomes and how they are for the people who go through the system, the frequent utilizers of the system in particular. I don't see any reference here to the police auditor and other protections we have for people who, in this situation, are almost by definition among the most vulnerable people in the community. And I've heard these occasional stories about police use of force getting out of control. We know some that are well documented in the recent past. I've also heard that because we have a police auditor and that whole apparatus, that we actually do better than a lot of other communities. It would be great to have specific statistics on that, the way you had for sort of our percentile for medium-sized cities on property crime and violent crime. But I don't know if it's something you can easily integrate here, or if there's a way to talk about it, but there's now a vigorous discussion nationally about what we can do to rein in undue police use of force. There's a whole movement called Campaign Zero, not to be confused with Vision Zero, a transportation safety movement that some of you may associate with me, but Campaign Zero. And some of those strategies are clearly not relevant to us. They're relevant to really big cities, but it would be great to see if there are ways we can chip away at that here and understand the place of it for the people whom you spent a lot of time on talking about tonight.
I'll just say that the auditor produces an annual report that I believe he'll have out in a little bit, that it will have all the answers that you want to the questions with regard to use of force and what our trends have been the last couple of years.
Jill. Chief
Wait,
Kearns.
I'm sorry, just to follow up. That was the second part. Do you want to say anything about the first part about metrics, linking cahoots and the other services from a budget standpoint?
Yeah, we can show you what the effect of the 24-hour cahoots service has been. We can generate a report that will show what that's been like. They've only been at full service, I believe, since November sometime. It might even be later than that. It was first funded. The funding began in July, and the service wasn't ready until November. So we don't have many months. If you're asking about the effect of the new service level that the council approved last year, we only have a few months of record.
Well, that would be great to see that, admittedly, less than a year of data. Just to be really clear, I'm partly interested in that preliminary, that early experience with the increase in cahoots funding. I'm mostly interested in hearing from you what you think the metrics should be, what measures should we be looking at the Budget Committee to understand the efficacy of money put into that area as we compare it to other areas where we might recommend increases in funding or, other recommendations that you may have.
So, Chief Kearns, so you had mentioned that the call for service is up, and then you also said it's hard to get staff in emergency call services. So, why is it up? Is it more people or more crime or?
Yeah, we don't know the answer to that. Our crime rates, and we measure property crime rates, violent crime rates, and so on. Crime rates in the United States have come down. They haven't come down as quickly in Oregon as they have in some states. Eugene's property crime rate has steadily come down recently, but our calls for service have gone up, and so we haven't been able to discern exactly what that is, but by my estimate, it would be caused by the chronically homeless population that is involved in the behavior crimes and the mental health calls that we go to.
So people calling in, like you said, if they see a tent or they see someone on their street, things like just their general concern in that.
Yeah, they see those things, or they see, or someone's behaving in a way that's frightening on the street, or I won't go into all the details because some of the crimes are unpleasant to describe, but we see more and more of that, and I think those are the calls that we get.
So sometimes it's just, are they notifications or requiring you to come out, or are they just letting you know what's happening? So
No, they're calls because someone is not in possession of their faculties and they're disrupting a restaurant,
okay,
or they're frightening people on the street, or there's somebody sleeping on my front porch, those types of things.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't really have a
Kelsey,
question.
can I get in the queue?
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't really have a question. I know we have our service profiles for public safety coming up in the fall, and that would be a good time maybe to capture some of that data on the Cahoots. And I was going to ask that if we can maybe have the calls for service by the hour, since we're going to 24/7.
Okay.
That could be included. I know there weren't any metrics mentioned last year when we increased that funding.
Councilor Surratt.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I also just want to mention I did watch the Budget Committee meeting that I missed last week and was very impressed with the amount of information that was shared, that you guys powered through it, and also the good discussion that was had. So thanks for that. I just wanted to say one thing and then ask a question of the chief. I do hope the court team, the CORT team, will prove successful enough to become a permanent part of our public safety apparatus. I think it sounds very promising. And then I heard the chief mention that safety downtown and adjacent neighborhoods and parks is a priority coming up, and I appreciate hearing that, because we have received quite a lot of input recently from particularly folks in the Whitaker, although I have heard from folks further up River Road along River 2 that they're feeling underserved and vulnerable when it comes to public safety. So, Chief, I was wondering if you are prepared to share any specific steps on your plan to alleviate some of these problems, particularly along the river and at the skate park, and are there any actions that the Budget Committee could recommend that might assist you?
Well, the next presentation will be about our efforts downtown and in the parks this spring and summer. You're going to talk about the near neighborhood also? Your neighborhood. And it sounds like that'll also include the nearby neighborhoods.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Garrett, did you want to be in the queue?
I'm listening for that. Thank you.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you. When I started on council 10 years ago, there was a study that was conducted. I wish I could remember the name of the company. I bet you can. It had been done in either 05 or 06, I want to say, that talked about staffing levels. Do you happen to remember what I'm talking about, either of you?
Yes, the Magellan Report.
Magellan Report, thank you very much. That was the third one, I think, in about like 6-8 years it had been done. And at the time, it talked about, as I understood it, that report said, okay, we've extensively interviewed people in the community, and here are their expectations, that if I call in an emergency, an officer's going to be there within 4 minutes, or if I have this happen to me, I kind of expect that kind of response from the police department. And based on the community's surveyed responses, said, here's the staffing level, you need to do that job, according to us. And my recollection at the time, 10 years ago, was that there was a significant double-digit percentage that we were understaffed to the community's expectation. So my questions are two and maybe threefold. Number one, how would you characterize the calls for service since 10 years ago? Have they doubled? Have they increased 80%? How would you characterize that?
Well, conservatively, they've gone up about 40%.
Yeah. What would you say has been the relative increase in your total staffing levels from 10 years ago?
We were just looking at that last week. I believe at the time we were authorized about 90 patrol officers, and now I think we're at 96. And then in 2010, the City Council added the downtown team. We had 10 bike officers, now we have 9.
It would seem to me that on first blush, I mean, at least from what I know as an amateur, that the department's pretty well understaffed comparatively to other departments of like size or like communities. Would you say that's true?
In Oregon, we're a little below average. When compared to other states, we're very different.
Would you say it is worthwhile for us to commission another outside report of any kind to know that for sure?
I didn't mean to interrupt you. What I suggest and what we've decided on is to take what we know about our current conditions, look at the entire system, the entire community justice system, municipal court, community court, CORT, CAHOOTS, all the components that are contributing to improving safety here, and ask ourselves, if we're going to invest in making all this bigger in order to deal with the responsibilities that we have, where would we begin? So that's the next step that we're going to take.
Here's the reason it's important to me. It's my perception that the police department does an amazing job, and our community system does an amazing job with the resources they have compared to the challenge that exists. But that's not what concerns me most. In Envision Eugene, we know that in the next 15 to 20 years, there's going to be 34,000 more people here, minimum. I think it'll be a lot closer to 40 or 50,000 people. And I want to know what we're doing to prepare for that capacity, much less handle what we have today. So that's kind of what I'm wondering, how do we think through that intelligently at this point?
And I think and I'll just mention it with the chief, I think it's a true statement that the capacity of the entire system is less than it needs to be. Police officers, prosecutors at courts, jails, at municipal and at the county level. So we know all that capacity ultimately needs to be increased. What we want to do, and what we're doing and will be doing, is saying, and I appreciate the bringing the Envision Eugene numbers into that, because then that says, okay, yes, now and that. So I appreciate that. So we'll want to make sure we do that. Say, what does all of that capacity need to be in order to provide a safe community, as the council has articulated that. Our intent is to do that as we move through this calendar year and be able to have that to bring back to the council that says, okay, given all of this information, if we want to increase this capacity, what is that, and what's the best way to do it in a way that continually maximizes whatever we buy in chunks as we move forward. And that's our intent, to be able to bring that back to the council and then make a plan to how we get there.
Thank you very much.
Ken?
I think this is kind of a comment, maybe it's sort of a comment question. With respect to services and human services and investing in those and the relationship to public safety, and we've talked about this, I think, a couple of times in the last several years, but I've come to believe, as I've sat on this group, and particularly on the human services side, that the community investing in human services types of work or efforts kind of on the front end or proactively out there can end up realizing benefits for the public safety, whether it's police or fire, personnel, in terms of maybe kind of on the other end of the cycle. So if you're spending some money up front to work, say, with some of the frequent users or whatever the case may be, that you end up, instead of having to spend the kind of time you're doing now, or maybe have in the past, reacting, where you haven't spent that money, or you haven't invested that time in those services, you're able then to free up. I don't know that you so much save money. And I've had these discussions with a couple of people. I don't know that we're actually just going to save dollars there, but what you're doing is really freeing up the personnel to do other important things that otherwise they wouldn't be doing because they're spending their time reacting. And I don't know that I'm really looking for anything there. I expect in a few weeks when the budget rolls out and we see what human services is allocated by the staff, and I'm going to find myself advocating for increasing that, as we talked about last year, trying to restore that back up to some historical levels. But I think it's important to invest in some of that human service work up front from this perspective, because I think it can realize quite a bit of benefit. So I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. It isn't the entire homeless population that creates public safety issues. In fact, it's probably a very small percentage of people who are chronically homeless because of their mental health conditions or drug or alcohol addiction. And they behave in a way that is just problematic day after day after day. And so what they need is those social services, but they also need the accountability in order to influence them to take advantage of it. So we need both. And it feels to me that we're out of balance at the moment.
And I would, on the social service side, I think one of the questions that would be a great conversation for the council initially moving into the budget is, with the dollars that we do already appropriate to human services, HSC and others, what is the most effective way to target those resources to meet the goals that the council has? And we have generally not done that, or the budget committee and the council has generally not tried to figure out if we're providing $100, we tend to sort of non-discretionally pass that on, which is maybe appropriate, or it may be how do we invest very specifically in this system that's now going to help with capacity. So I think that's actually an interesting policy question for the council to think about as we move into the budget. And so how do you even use the existing dollars, much less if you want to add some capacity to that, or dollars to that?
A couple quick things to follow up with what Mike was talking about. When you talk about an approximate 40% call volume increase, is that specific police, or does that include the call volume that Fire EMS has seen also? Is that general?
That's
dispatch?
police.
Just police.
It does not include Fire and EMS.
What percentage of the calls, ballpark, do you see some sort of resolution, whether there's an arrest or whatever? Are you chasing calls that you can never find the person, or you're truly making a definitive contact and resolving the call for service?
I wouldn't even be able to venture a guess.
A minority, a majority? I mean,
well, we go to a lot of calls where there isn't where you wouldn't expect it to end in an arrest. We go to calls where someone's taken into custody, but they're never charged with a crime, and they shouldn't be. Every burglary we respond to, I believe the arrest rate in those is probably in the 10%, something like that, of all the burglaries. I think it's typical, yes. Yeah.
And then to follow up on Ken's quick ballpark, what are we talking about percentage-wise as far as far as calls that are generated as a result of either drug issues or mental health issues or any, it's a very active population. Does that represent a quarter, half? I mean, what are you talking about as far as your response?
The sheriff knows how many people in the jail receive mental health care, and I think it's better than 50%. I think it might be much more than that. I just don't remember the figure. And then with regard to property crime and violent crime that's related to gaining somebody else's property, robbery for instance, in those cases, probably 80% of the offenders are addicted to methamphetamine or heroin.
Is that pretty average?
I don't know how that compares to other cities. I think drug addiction is pretty typical with property crime, though.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Scott.
I like the study idea that you're talking about. It seems like in the last year or so we've added some money to Cahoots. We've done the court, or we've done the community court piece. But if you think about adding more patrol officers, then you probably need another sergeant, and then how do you train these folks? I mean, you're just looking like kicking the domino, and it just starts tipping more dominoes. And the same with bed space in the jails. So if you're not using them, you're still paying for them. So going back to the study, are there existing studies that we have that are still valid, and they can be combined with maybe a new study? And how do you envision this working together, and the timeline for this, that we can get some results? Is this the next budget cycle that we're looking at? It seems like we need to assess what we've been doing over the last year.
I think that would be a smart approach. There's some consultants' reports that we have on the bookshelf that aren't too old, that are still meaningful, and the work that was done with community court is pretty recent. A great deal of effort went into understanding what it would take to maintain that and to grow it. I think that if we found a consultant, they would certainly rely heavily on those. There's more work to do. Those are only a few areas of a few components of the system, and there's much more than that still needs to be studied.
Any other questions? All right, I think we'll move on to the next topic on our agenda.
Thank you. Oh, I thought you wanted the water.
Right there.
Awesome, thank you.
So next on our agenda is a downtown update.
Here, another packet.
Come on up.
Oh, super, thank you.
All right. Just go ahead and start, or you want to wait till you have your handouts? So, hi, I'm Sarah Maderi, Assistant City Manager. I'm going to kick off our presentation or be the leadoff batter, and I'm hoping I get to first base. It is baseball season. We think that this conversation about downtown really ties in nicely with the safe community, so we appreciate the moving the agenda around for a couple of reasons. One, because it just ties in great, but also there's been a lot of recent public conversation about downtown. In particular, you've heard about dog ordinance and smoking ordinance possibility, and the work from Project for Public Spaces. So there's been a lot of discussion, and we felt like it would be good to give you some history and context. And then lastly, as you might recall, in last year's supplemental budget, the council approved $500,000 of one-time funding to really go to supplement some of our work in downtown and neighboring areas. And so we wanted to give you more of an operationals plan about what we're doing. But before we do that, we thought it would be good to just give you a little bit of history and context. So I'll do it, and then we'll just kind of move down this line and have plenty of time for questions. So this is a headline from 1971 in the Register Guard, and I promise I'm not going to make you go through every year since 1971, or even go farther back. If I'm carrying this book from like 1915 that talks about the farmers market in downtown, and if you read this book, you will say, "Oh my God, we're doing the same thing again. And so I do think it's important to recognize that our downtown has always been important. People see it as being a vital economic center important for jobs, for arts and culture, for our prosperity as a region, and so it does get a lot of attention. And back in 1971, you can see people were talking about and did ban dogs from the downtown, and were adopting what people considered to be very tough mall rules. I know, I saw that. There's really interesting story. And if you kind of just track that story through time, you'll see as we kind of headed into 2010, this is what most of us are familiar with. These are the really positive stories that happened. You know, people were really excited. There was a lot of hope. We saw the pits filling up, new businesses emerging, and the headlines and the stories were really filled with people's excitement and hope for the future. And then we came into 2015, and you can see that the cycle is shifting back to a little bit of concern about behaviors in downtown and loitering. And it's not that all of those things haven't been happening all at the same time. It just seems like the focus changes. And to me, one of the things I compared it to, and I didn't put it in the slides, but I did bring a prop, is this growth spiral of youth and adult development that happens. And there's proven science about how kids develop in these cycles of years. And even though things get really hard and they feel like you're really struggling, you're still growing and you're still getting better. And I think of downtown as being on this spiral trajectory, that it's not that there's not really bad things happening right now that we need to acknowledge and take care of, but that it's on this really positive trajectory spiral that we're heading to. And so I point to this as my hope, while also being very real and acknowledging that we have issues to deal with. And those issues that happened in 2015 are really what happened when the mayor said, you know what, we just need to bring everybody together, and we're going to have this Downtown Solutions Forum, and we're going to ask people what they think we can do to make downtown better. And as I was reviewing some of these photos, I noted a number of people from the Budget Committee were actually at this meeting and in some of the photos. So I appreciate that, and you have a lot of firsthand knowledge about this. But it was a very positive event. Over 100 people came. We separated into groups and brainstormed issues, and we came up with lots of ideas and solutions. There was over 400 ideas generated in that night. We kind of quickly assembled them into priorities and came up with probably 100 things that people thought are things we should pursue as priority items. And these topics right here were kind of the big ones. And I won't go into a ton of detail about it, but there were different themes. So we themed them out into what we called the big ideas. And these were people saying, you know, what would really help downtown would be to redevelop the eWeb property, or to underground the railroad. If we could just underground the railroad, we could do something really special. So we called those the big ideas. There was a lot of conversation that revolved around health, and that had everything to do with we need more restrooms in downtown, and it also had to do with a lot of people wanted downtown to be smoke-free. That's where that idea came from. This topic or theme of parks, plazas, and facilities, this really touched on what we're talking about and what the council's talking about now around a downtown community center, potentially a daycare or a day use center. We talked about a permanent facility for the farmers market, new park blocks. The next theme around programming said, hey, we just need more fun things to do. People really like what was happening in downtown, and can we have more of that, please? The group talked a lot about public safety and behavior, the perception of safety, and also the desire to have more police on the street and more safety on the street. Talked a lot about services and then, you know, some of the just more welcoming amenities and fun. And we say fun because there was even an idea of a merry-go-round. And I come back to that date because that's really what kind of sent us on this trajectory. We're on two different but very connected things. One of them was the work that we pursued with projects for public spaces, and the second being some of the work that we're doing that Jeff's going to report on more near-term, short-term operations issues. And those two things sometimes come together. Like, why are you doing this report to tell us what we already know? And it's like they're not. These things come together and then they go back apart. So as we left 2015 and entered 2016, I think everybody knows that we feel like we've been a little bit out of balance, and we put some investments in the winter of 2016 into what we would call the winter days. We really ramped up our police presence in downtown. We did a lot of programming, tried to make those winter days fun. I think a lot of people participated. We heard a lot about how that would have been even more fun in the sunny days, and so you'll get to hear more about that tonight. So with that, that's kind of the context that brings us here, and then I'm going to let Nan talk about the Project for Public Spaces portion of that work, and then Jeff will hit the plan for the summer.
Great, thank you. I'm Nan Lawrence. I manage downtown projects in the Community Development Division. So Council heard about the Project for Public Spaces work about a month ago, but we wanted to make sure that the Budget Committee had the same opportunity. Downtown needs to be a destination where people want to come, a thriving neighborhood that helps retain talent and homegrown businesses. It needs to be a place in the city that belongs to everybody, that everybody is proud of, and that's what the Project for Public Places project, the Project for Public Spaces, and the project, too many P's in there, the Places for People project. By the end of this, I'm going to be saying PPS. Exactly, I'll be trying that too. So that's what the Places for People project is trying to create and reinforce. So the goal is to design, program, and manage places that are and feel safe, welcoming, interesting, and engaging. So we've been working with, here you ready? The Project for Public Spaces, PPS, an internationally known placemaking group. We've been working with them to listen to as many people as we can, including folks in every ward of the city, a wide array of stakeholders. We've sent out focus groups in the evening, actually in the evening and in the rain, and we've held public workshops, and we've listened to what people have been telling us. PPS has given us a lot of ideas and some big ideas for solutions. Some of these really are iterative, building from immediate short-term, what they call lighter, quicker, cheaper projects or interventions, to long-term transformations, including coordination with City Hall and the Farmers Market. We're set to begin building on the partnerships that we've been creating, including close collaboration with the downtown safety work, social service agencies, property owners, and downtown businesses. This is not just a design process, but really a proactive strategy to help create the downtown that we all want for our community. The winter days, as Sarah mentioned, this was part of our lighter, quicker, cheaper intervention, and it was really cold, if you remember. So I've heard a couple of comments from this that I'll relay. One is a friend who has young children told me that she came downtown with her toddler. She said she felt that there was a part of downtown that just opened up to her, that opened up to families with the winter days. So they roasted marshmallows, they got to run around a little bit. She felt that it changed her view of what could happen downtown. I also heard from some of the property owners and the business owners on Broadway who said they went down, they had a cup of hot chocolate with people they'd never met before. And for them, the whole thing was a win. So we feel like pulling people together, a more inclusive space, is what we're trying to do with all the recommendations from PPS. So we're trying to build on the strengths from downtown and what we've heard from engaging the community to design, program, and manage the spaces with infrastructure, events, public art, and amenities to create places that are inclusive, safe, active, and authentically, uniquely Eugene. And I really want to emphasize the inclusive. I think one of the biggest lessons we've learned from the Project for Public Spaces is that you create places that everybody wants to be in, and then it's a way that the community is really built and reinforced in these important public places. So we're now moving into the implementation of ideas from the Places for People project, and Jeff Perry will talk about steps that we're taking for this spring and this summer.
Thanks, Dan. I have a different presentation that we'll talk about. Thankfully, everybody's already defined all the acronyms, so I can just say PPS going forward. I'm positive I would mess that up.
You need help.
Yeah. So So I'm Jeff Perry. I'm the city's facilities director, and here with me tonight is Captain Sam Kamkar from Eugene Police. And we're going to talk, so Sarah talked about the history a little bit, and Ann talked about some recommendations, the PPS work, and we're going to talk about what we're going to do moving forward in spring, for the spring and summer of the season. And so at the beginning of the year, approximately, a team was formed, an operational team was formed that includes Dan, Sam, and myself, and representatives and division managers from almost every department within the city. And so it's a pretty robust team. It's a great team that we've been working with, and lots of different perspectives. And so we've been brainstorming and working on strategies going forward. And so I'll talk about that here in a minute. And so the team's purpose is to create a safe downtown and parks that are welcoming to everyone, that will be achieved through environmental enhancements, police and security presence, and by programming activities. And one thing that you'll note is that we're not just focusing on downtown, but also nearby parks to downtown. And so we're trying to address some of the issues that we've been seeing holistically. And we're also paying close attention to neighboring, or neighborhoods, I should say, such as the Whitaker and things like that. So we aren't just responding to issues, but we're looking at it, you know, kind of the big picture as we go forward. The team brainstormed and strategized for several months, worked through a lot of different concepts and ideas. We utilized the principles of the triple bottom line, where we evaluated the economic, the social, and the environmental impacts of the decisions we're making. And so we were very thoughtful going forward. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about those strategies, the overarching strategies, and then the objectives and goals that we plan to implement over the next, actually we're working on implementing things as we speak. And so everything that we're going to talk about is in progress. And so I'll hand it off to Captain Kamkar.
Thank you, Jeff. And members of the Budget Committee, I wanted to thank you for the gift of your time, and I mean that with all sincerity. My name is Sam Kamkar, and I oversee the patrol division for the Eugene Police Department, which is essentially all the uniformed officers and special teams. I want to spend just a few minutes tonight with you and talk a little bit about our safety and security plan and some of our strategies about what we want to do in the next 6 months. These are short-term solutions. And also the role that social services agencies are going to play in that, and it's a fairly significant role. With reference to helping those in need, I have been a police officer for almost 24 years. And I have written lots of tickets. I've arrested a lot of people and put quite a few people behind bars. In fact, when you showed the photograph of the mall, the downtown mall, I remember working the downtown mall as a beat officer and arresting people and getting assaulted. So I want to echo what I've heard from the chief, is that as bad as it sounds, we've seen some significant improvements I have over the course of my career. But I get to see the bad stuff. But if there's one thing that I can share with you from my entire career, the one thing that I've learned is that we're not going to reduce crime and increase the sense of safety and security and build trust with the community if all we do is write tickets and arrest people. There are people that need to be arrested, there are people that need to be cited, and there are people that need to be held in jail. But I've learned from personal experience, tickets aren't going to do it. Arrests aren't going to do it. And you heard Christy early on talk about the overall criminal justice system and what's happening within the justice system. And I'm convinced that based on what we know and the work that we've done, in the long run, we're going to get a lot more bang for our money, our time, our efforts, our energy, if we work on helping those in need, hence the title that you see up there. So with that in mind, one of the things that we're going to do is expand our community outreach resource team. You heard about the court program, and what I mean by expansion is that we recognize that during the summertime, a portion of our time is going to be spent in the parks, so we're going to dedicate additional resources to that. Well, naturally, when you have police officers that are going to be riding their bicycles and walking the beat in an area, there's potentially some displacement with that. And the objective is not to just write tickets and arrest people. The objective is to help people. And we've learned that the court program does a good job, so we want to expand that to parks and the neighboring neighborhoods, such as Whitaker. The community court, I've been involved with community court since inception. I've seen it work, and we as a team have made a commitment to try to spend a portion of our dollars towards community court, specific to defense and prosecution and social services and whatever they need. And when we talk about increasing collaboration with social services, we've learned that we can't do this on our own. And there are a lot of good people that want to help us out, that are helping us out, but they also need us to sincerely reach out to them and work with them, so we're going to continue to do that with them. The one thing that we've identified is the need to set clear expectations, both positive and negative. For example, in the parks, you walk into the park blocks today, some people, especially if you're from out of town, you may not recognize that it's a park. It is a park, and parks have rules and regulations. So one of the things that we want to do is make sure that regardless of where you're coming from, you're new in town or not, you know what the expectations for our community is. So we're going to have additional signage rules posted about all the don'ts. Don't do this and don't do that, or you're going to get in trouble. But we also know that that might be a little bit negative. So how about we do something positive, which is taking advantage of the Be campaign. You know, be respectful, be welcoming, be compassionate, be visionary, and try to inundate downtown and with this positive vibe that you know, this is how we want you to be. This is what this community is all about. So we plan on spending some resources on that. Now, when it comes to improving safety and a sense of safety, we know that the mere presence of police officers deters crime. We know that. We've seen that over and over again. We recently saw it in the park blocks. And we also know that the mere presence of police officers also creates that sense of safety for most people. Not all. Not everybody wants us around. So we've also seen an example where the council had talked about one of their statements was having visible and accessible police presence as one of their goals. So with that in mind, in the next 6 months, what you ought to see is an increase in patrol in both downtown parks and the adjoining areas, including the Whitaker neighborhood. So we'll be increasing our staffing. Now, when I say increasing, that doesn't mean we're going to bring police officers from out of town. We're using the existing resources. These are going to be officers that are going to be selected specifically for this job, who have more of a problem-solving, problem-oriented approach, community policing approach in doing their things. Expanding the Park Ambassador program, we saw that it was an effective program, so what we want to do is expand that to the park blocks. It may not look just like the Park Ambassador, it may be a park host, but a version of that. Try to do that this summer. Collaborating with security services to ensure consistency. And I want to just talk a little bit about that. You've also heard the chief today and in the past talk about our philosophy. We've heard about data-led policing, our approach towards policing in Eugene, the way we incorporate our compassion and really the city's values into how we go about doing things. One of my goals in the next few months is to try to re-energize our work with the security services that are in downtown, as well as our partners such as Lane Community College Public Safety to LTD or what have you, so that we're all consistent in the way we are policing downtown. Because if we're not, we're going to go in different directions, and that we follow the same philosophy. The Downtown Watch program. Some of you may be aware of the Park Watch program. If you're not aware of that, just in a very shortly brief description of that is the Park Watch program has been in place for quite some time. We use technology to be able to have community members and employees use their smartphone to communicate anything that they see, whether it's a camping violation or a downed tree or what have you. So we know it works with parks, so we want to try to implement it in downtown so that people can say this is what's going on. So we right out immediately we have that data and we can act on it immediately. And last but not least, leveraging existing volunteer program. We hear more and more from social services that there are a lot of people that want to help us out. Well, let's take advantage of that, and that's our aim. With that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
All right, and I apologize, I should have mentioned we passed out some flyers that summarize the highlights of the work we're doing, just for reference. And so next I'll talk about physical improvements we're planning to make. One of the core concepts is make spaces healthier and safer. Right now, there's a project through Parks and Open Space that's underway to renovate WJ Park, the basketball court, and kind of the area around that. They're working on that as we speak to make it safer, more functional for park patrons. We're also looking at decorative lighting downtown. We've had some discussions with our local stakeholders and partners about maybe some kind of decorative string lights and things, and there's a photo of that in the flyer as well. But some positive lighting, not just all security related type lighting. That said, we do want to add some security lighting in the areas that are dark, some of the alleys that are really dark and feel unsafe and things like that. And on a side note there, we are exploring some LED options that are very low infrastructure. We can just install them and put them up and they'll work pretty well. I think there's some pretty good options out there right now. So we're excited about that because that can happen real fast. Probably one of the bigger items we have is an attended restroom. We're working on that right now, but we are going to have an attended restroom. We talk a lot about restrooms and all the issues and the needs around restrooms, and the one thing that we do know is that if they're attended, that seems to, I'm not going to say solve all those issues, but it really appears to be very effective, and so we're planning on doing that. We're evaluating where it's going to be right now. There is, as Captain Kamkar mentioned, park host that we'll have in the park blocks. If we have something in the park blocks, we'll probably leverage that position. If it's in another location, we may need to have another staff do that. But we're working through that, and that should be rolled out here in the very near future. Also looking at some minor infrastructure upgrades. That's really electrical in the park blocks. We found during the winter events that we were flipping breakers and lots of things, and so we want to make that space more functional and usable for those types of events, and so we're working on that. And then also day storage and lockers. There's a lot of people downtown that need access to resources, the library and so on, and they don't have a great place to store their belongings, and so we're working on that as we speak, and we'll probably start out with the library and coordinating with them, and is that a infrastructure, is it a partnership we can work through, but that is something we're moving forward on. Improve the look and feel of downtown. And so one of the things that you're going to see right away is some deep cleaning. And so we're planning to bring in 2 additional FTE to our downtown cleaning team, our downtown maintenance team, to start pressure washing sidewalks, alleys, public spaces. We already do some of the public spaces, but more frequently, and just a dedicated effort to that work. And so that'll be happening soon. And we may be rolling out some new equipment. We're researching that and talking to some vendors right now, but that should be, will be probably in the next month or so, you'll see something there. Furnishings and fun features. And so, as some of you may recall, we put in some neat tables and chairs at Holt Plaza and also Broadway Plaza to support the food carts and the different functions and things. And so we want to expand on that. That was very successful, and we got a lot of positive feedback. And so looking at things that are portable and movable, we're going to be working on that. And as far as fun features, we want to do some kind of pilot projects, maybe bring out some ping pong tables, some foosballs, some different types of games that people would like to come downtown and utilize. And we have to be conscious, if it's in the park blocks with the Saturday market and those sorts of things, and just, coordinated effort. But we're excited about doing some things like that. Continue to expand on our planters and landscaping. We have a team that does a lot of great work there, and it's just, we want to add to that, and the hanging baskets and so on, and just expand there. Also, the public art program, we're looking at some enhancements. Obviously, we've done some mural work. We're going to continue to do that, and look at some temporary artwork as well. And finally, one of the things, we're actually talking to the library about this, and maybe there's some other locations where we can install solar charging stations, and where we can provide access to power in key spots for the public. And the library has heavy use with their outlets, actually, and the people that come in to use those for power and so on. And so there might be some real opportunities there. Programming and activation. So we want to create reasons to come, and one of the things that we're really focused on is, I'm going to say it, PPS recommendations on the lighter, quicker, cheaper effort. And so that's really what you're going to see right away. We can bring in a couple more staff to start cleaning more, and we can implement things right away. And so that's what our primary focus is right now. We want to partner on an events and program schedule. One of the things that we've noted is that there's not one spot to go look for events downtown or in our parks. You have to go to a lot of different places to find that information. And so we want to provide something better. I think it's going to need to be a partnership, because it's not just city events, but private events as well. And so we're working on that. And also develop a busking program that activates public space with live music. We have city staff coordinating with some local businesses right now to see what we can do to implement a busking program. We also, want to continue to develop, our programming partnerships, just other events, just really coordinating on that front, as well as a digital arts project, projector where we can display some really neat digital arts on buildings and whatnot. And we know there's interest from the U of O and the Harmonics Laboratory, and so we're working on some coordination around making that happen. Pop-up retail businesses, I know planning, or development I should say, is working on a pilot project there where we can maybe provide some space for businesses to test out products and things like that, pop-up retail. And obviously build on the success of the huge fun events that happened over the last year. And I can give you some examples of things that are coming. We have a human foosball tournament in the park blocks, the huge parade, Sunday streets again. There's the 20 by 21 mural festival, Friday art walk, and many other things that are coming. So just some things that we're really looking forward to and programming, and we'll continue to pursue those efforts. And looking forward, I think a month or so ago at one of the presentations, the downtown manager to council was presented as a concept, and we are definitely looking at that as an option. One of the things that we've realized is that there's an immediate need for some research. There's a lot of things going on and a lot of resources we can leverage and coordination, and so I think a downtown manager would be very beneficial to all of this work to keep it going and staying on top of that. So we're pursuing that right now. As we move forward and looking at our long-term goals, aligning with PPS recommendations, and then, of course, identifying some sustainable funding, because we know, just doing it for one season isn't going to solve it ongoing. We really need to, work on our funding as far as that goes. And that's the end of my presentation.
Great, thank you very much. I have Councilor Clark in the queue. Councilor Blanca.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. I appreciate it very much. I'm trying to reconcile some things. I appreciate your report, and I'm having a challenge with it. I have, of the two enforcement officers who've been at our table so far tonight, Captain Cam Carr and the Chief, I have more respect for. They know this. But the difficulty I'm having is with what we hear from both the public and what we heard from the consultant at PPS, and the response we're getting as far as an action plan. Now, I'm not mad at you. I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just trying to reconcile this because it's my job to say, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. We had a public hearing where we had dozens and dozens and dozens of local business owners who weren't saying, please program these spaces better. Please give us more signs. They were saying, they weren't saying, please retask 4 officers from somewhere else for a little while. They were saying the behavior of people downtown is so bad, we're going to move, folks. The consultant said downtown is in crisis and it's worse than any place that she had seen in the country. My complaint at the council table was that, of course, there's no single solution. Of course, there's no silver bullet. Of course, enforcement isn't the only answer. But it's the thing most conspicuously absent here, is stepping up enforcement of absolutely objectionable behavior to the degree to which it currently exists in our downtown. Now, I'm not a professional at this. The captain is and the chief are. And I respect their professional opinion and their capacity to do this better than anyone I know. But I have cognitive dissonance with the level of complaints we hear, the level we hear from outside experts that we hire to tell us this stuff, and the things we know instinctively, and the level of response we're hearing about what we should do about it. I would like to see us having at least saying, we recognize how bad some of the behavior is downtown, and we're doing some significant things to address that behavior. I would like to see us propose 5 new officers, 15 new beds, and at least 3 new ADAs to handle what we should be doing that I think would be sufficient to the challenge we face. But I don't want to fight that battle alone. So I'm trying to reconcile this.
I think a couple of things with that. It's probably a multi-approach response. And so one of the things that we do have to keep in mind, and as we've talked before, is that all of the behavior that people dislike is not something that we can arrest them for or give them a citation for. And so that is a piece of that. And so while I fully understand that there's behaviors that none of us should have to tolerate and have to put up with, it's not always we can arrest somebody for that. So that's one piece of that. I think what we have heard consistently from all our professionals is absolutely we need to increase the presence of our security and our public safety officers and police. And so what you see in this is a pretty significant or an additional presence in the downtown, also being mindful that we need to have presence in the surrounding neighborhoods and in the surrounding parks. And so as potentially things happen, we're also able to respond to that. So there is a significant increase in presence. What we also know is that if all we do is have presence, but nothing else comes back to fill it back in, you actually haven't generated the activity, which is also one of the purposes that council has consistently articulated for the downtown. And so it is a multi-approach, a multifaceted approach that we're trying to take in the downtown.
I think I'm out of time, but I'd like to respond, so I don't know. Should I be in the second round, or can I do it now?
Let's put you in the second round.
Okay.
Councilor Zelenka.
Yeah, great presentation. We're going to get a copy of it?
It's here.
Yeah. Well, I meant that.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, please. And don't put 4 on one page, please, because I like to read it. So we also have to be mindful of pushing the problem out into other neighborhoods, and I know that that's a concern for many people, and I know that maybe you can address how we're going to handle that. And then secondarily, Captain Kamkar, how many cops do we have downtown right now that are on that beat?
Well, I'll answer your second question first, then I'll go to the first one. So with reference to the number of officers, we have 9 officers dedicated to downtown. And they're spread over a 7-day period, of course, 24-hour. And what's happened is this year we changed their schedules so that for the most part, they're going to be working during the daylight hours, and then we're supplementing the night shift with officers from patrol teams. So we've really increased downtown staffing quite a bit by 4 additional officers at night. And then during the summertime, we're bringing in 2 additional officers on top of that.
So how many at one time do we have during the day? Will we have during the day?
Well, that depends on the day because their schedule is staggered. On certain days, which I hate to admit, on a Sunday, for example, I have 2. But these numbers change depending on their work shifts. So some days I have as many as 9, some days I have 7, and it just varies.
So quite a few number, okay.
Now keep in mind that these officers have vacations, days off, training, certification they have to go through and what have you. So,
right, yeah, and lives that they have to deal with. And I appreciate how difficult it is to be a police officer today, and especially in downtown. And maybe you can talk about some of the difficulties with that. A lot of the things that people, and John alluded to this, a lot of the people that talk to us were proposing that we arrest people for things that are basically unconstitutional, like panhandling is by this Oregon Supreme Court said that's not an offense in Oregon, street speech. There's a big difference between panhandling and harassing people, but maybe you could talk about some of those the tougher things that we can't do, and some of the things that maybe we can do that resolve some of those problems.
Do I have a couple of hours?
Yeah.
Okay. You're absolutely right.
Well, we're here till 8:30, so.
Till 8:30. There are challenges. The one thing about our officers in Eugene is that they are very well trained and educated. They understand the implications of the 14th Amendment. I can tell you not every police officer in Oregon or every agency talks about the 14th Amendment and equal protection. And they understand the difference between racial profiling versus criminal profiling. They understand all these nuances. And with that in mind, one of the things that we talk to them about and we train them is equal protection, is recognizing that regardless of their personal beliefs, biases, implicit or explicit or what have you, we, all of us, have raised our right hand and taken an oath. And it's a pretty special oath. And that oath is to protect the constitutional rights of everybody, even the people that we may not like. We call it the pretty people and not so pretty people. But that's what we've got to do. And with that in mind, they do a fairly good job of discerning that and recognize those challenges. And they are frustrated because people do come up to them and ask them, why is it that you're not arresting these people? And we can't. What we know we can do is that we can have a presence that's compassionate but yet stern and effective. Make no mistake, I'm not talking about leniency. I'm not talking about being soft on crime. I don't want our officers to be soft. I want them to be stern, and I want them to be professional, but yet I want them to be compassionate. And that's what I talk to them about. That's what the chief talks to them about all the time. So we also know that when we are in contact with these people, especially the most vulnerable people in our community, most of them are victims. And their victims are predatory offenders, some very bad people that are preying on the homeless. And so if we're able to provide that presence and build that trust and relationship with these people, regardless of who they are, in a long term, we're able to establish trust. It's going to be a lot easier to convince John Doe to trust me, to help him or help her to be able to get out of this lifestyle that he or she is in so that they can go and not live on the street or what have you. That's what our officers do, and that's what I'm proud of. Have we stopped issuing citations? Absolutely not, and I don't want us to. We need to continue to do that and arrest people where appropriate. But the challenges are there. They're constitutional. They are ethical challenges, moral challenges, and I think our officers do a pretty good job, especially our downtown officers.
Yeah, I think presence is an important thing. A good example is the park blocks, where you guys went over there and had a big presence in the park blocks over the last couple of months, and I've noticed a dramatic difference in what's going on. People are doing illegal and bad things and acting out bad behaviors, don't like cops standing around, and so that has been, I think, a very successful part of what's been going on. But maybe about the first question I asked about pushing out into the other neighborhoods.
So what you're referring to is essentially displacement, and we know displacement does occur anytime you have presence in any neighborhood. A certain amount of displacement will happen. We know that. We recognize that. But the good news is that we're talking about that in advance. In fact, I just left one of my command meetings just before I came to this meeting, and the topic of conversation was displacement into the Whitaker neighborhood. We specifically were talking about what is it that we're going to do to be able to handle that. If our approach in the next 6 months during the summertime, if we had an approach where me as a commanding officer, I told the officers that I want you to go out there and arrest every single person and write lots and lots of tickets, I suspect that we would see a lot of displacement in other neighborhoods. But that's not our approach. That's not our expectations. As you saw in the slide that we had helping people, our first and foremost initiative is to, when we come in contact with anybody, is welcome to Eugene, welcome to downtown, how can I help you? Those are the words that need to come out of the officers' mouths. And then from that point on, I expect them to do an assessment. And if we can help people, we'll help them. We'll use the court program. We'll use community court. We'll tap into social services. We'll try to mentor people. Our officers mentor people all the time. And then from that kind of an approach, my expectation is that we're going to see less displacement in other areas.
Cool. The dog ban that we just instituted, I know that was actually a request from the police department. How do you think that's going to work, and what's the effect going to be downtown?
Well, I saw the dog ban go into effect in West University, and at the time I was a sergeant, and what I saw in West University was we went through this period of having to educate people. And once that got done and people understood the culture and understood the expectations, going back to really educating people as what is acceptable behavior or what have you, I can't think of a time that we've really written a ticket had an issue with that. So my expectation is that with this pilot ordinance, our officers will use this as an opportunity to educate people about what the rules and regulations are, and we will always take that first step. And the only time you ought to see a citation or enforcement action is when somebody just outright refuses to comply with the law. And if there's no voluntary compliance, then we ought to be writing a citation and going to the next step. But I expect that we're not going to see the result of this thing immediately. It's going to take some time, just like any new initiative.
Two more questions. How do you respond to the people who say, just arrest all the drug dealers that are down there?
I would love to arrest all the drug dealers.
Me, I would like for you to do that too.
I would. There are drug dealers. There are predatory sex offenders, and there's some very bad people that we need to spend our time and energy on. Just before I came to this meeting tonight, I got flagged down by a lady that she thought that I could actually do police work, but didn't realize that I really don't know how a whole lot anymore. But she said to me, she says, "Officer, I need your help." And she says, "There's this guy that I know. He's a grown-up, and he's having an intimate relationship with this girl that just turned 15. And they're right over there, and I need you to do something about that." Well, we know sex trafficking goes on across the country and in our own hometown. And that's what I want to be able to spend my time and energy on, is those predatory offenses, those drug dealers, those people, and really sentence those people to jail time, and which we could use for sentence offenders. And then with the behavioral crimes, take a different approach with those.
Last question is about if you just cite broke homeless people, what good does that do? They'll just rack up the tickets. They're not going to pay them anyway.
Well, that's what's happening now. We've issued citations, and the ripple effect is on the criminal justice system. Testimony that we heard earlier. And it's costing the taxpayers money, and it's costing our officers time and effort. But with community court, the system that we have in place now, we're able to refer them. We still issue them a citation, but at least we have a way of being able to use a different off-ramp to be able to get them out of that horrible cycle that they're in.
Yeah, right. And I suspect community court, ramping up and expanding community court will help a lot in that regard.
I am a strong proponent of the community court.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
Josh.
Chelsea, could I get in the queue?
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you, of course, for the presentations. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your clarity about a whole series of priorities, your invocation of equal protection, and giving us a sense of the moral and ethical questions in all of this. I really see this as a continuation of the previous topic, so I do appreciate that you put these two together. I do want to circle us back to some budget questions in particular, and this is actually maybe a good time to put a little more flesh on the bones of what I said about thinking about metrics and measures of effectiveness. Before I talked about it in the context of more funding for Cahoots, but it could be any one of a number of things. I think the one thing I didn't say that I'd include in this, and this could relate to service profiles in the future, it could relate to just the way we look at these issues in each budget cycle, but it would be helpful to hear more from you over time, not necessarily tonight, about specific different outcomes. And what I mean by that is that much of what we heard tonight, we sort of focused on what's under the street light, like what we have easy data on, what's easy to think about. We talked about like the increase in the number of service calls to police. That's easy to focus on. We have data for it. It's not necessarily a good ingredient in in measures that would drive the way we allocate resources, because it's a symptom. It doesn't describe something that we're driving toward. It doesn't describe, people kept out of homelessness, or people rescued from human trafficking, or reductions in property crime. And so whatever you can do to help us get back toward those outcomes would be great. And I'm not saying that the discussion of tactics wasn't a good idea. I just think, let's remember, ultimately, we'll never be able to go through all of this detail. You won't ever be able to share all of your experiences. Well, thank goodness you won't have time to share all of your experiences with us. But we might be able to have a better discussion about how to allocate resources this year and in future years. I want to come back to one group of strategies that you called out. Jeff, you had the sort of a picture of the brainstorming session with a whole bunch of community members. I know I couldn't attend that, but I heard from many people who went to that, and they really appreciated the opportunity to work with PPS and to hear from them and come up with a whole series of ideas. I know one of the consultants' recommendations was to work with the community and to come up with a bunch of ideas. I had heard from people that they participated in that, and then they hadn't heard any more, and now this is the first I'm hearing, but I wasn't necessarily in that loop. I would just say, whatever you do on this, and maybe you can speak to this now, really should be part of, it shouldn't be, we had a session with PPS, people gave input, and then there were a bunch of ideas, and the city has chosen them, but rather there's some ongoing back and forth with those stakeholders. And if you could speak to that process so we understand what's happening there.
I think you're actually referring to a couple different points where we've engaged the public. Sarah mentioned it was a summit, I can't remember what we called it, with the mayor last year, and we got feedback from the public there and some strategies. And then PPS also engaged the public and did a lot of surveying and things like that. And so we've taken a lot of that information into account with our team, and we're starting to implement some things. We have talked to some stakeholders. We've been engaging, and we continue to do that. That's one of our strategies, to really make sure we're talking to the right people, and especially when we're rolling out some of the different strategies. Is this going to create with restrooms, is that going to work for some of the vulnerable populations and things like that? And so I guess I can just say that yes, we are planning on talking to the public going forward and key stakeholders.
Could I add to that?
Sure.
So, because we did really substantial public engagement, and I absolutely agree that once you've participated, you need some reinforcement for that engagement. So what we've done is we've created an email list, and we have a regular email going out to everybody that participated. In addition, we created an advisory group. So it's about 15 folks representing different stakeholders for downtown, and we're meeting with them and keeping them up to date on a regular basis. And I expect that as we go forward with, first of all, the lighter, quicker, cheaper work, but then the more intensive placemaking work, that there will be more public information going out. I would like to be able to keep everybody that participated informed and engaged, because that's part of the whole community building result that we're trying to see out of this project.
Yeah, and just as a clarification, and I may have misread the tone and content of the presentation, but what it felt like was you gathered people had ideas, and then the city decided what you were marching forward with. It sounds like there's more back and forth. I think you really want to tell that story and be clear. I've been at the council meetings or watched the council meetings and the testimony and stuff that's gone not quite viral, but nearly on Facebook with people's testimony, and people are very passionate about this. I think just the city delivering a report on it sends the wrong message. It sounds like you are doing a bunch of back and forth. I'd make sure you make that really clear that that's happening.
Councilor Surratt.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I also appreciate Councilor Clark's perspective and frustration, and we've heard that from folks downtown. But I have to say, as far as working to improve the feeling of safety and how we share our spaces downtown in a civil way, I actually think these various strategies, as the city manager referred to them, are moving us in the right direction. It's a complex environment, and I feel even if we had 25 dedicated police officers downtown, they couldn't possibly witness every violation and crime as they occur in order to give a ticket or arrest somebody. So even leaving aside some of the behaviors we really don't like, many of them are not illegal. So, I wish we could implement these various strategies even faster and more comprehensively, because I think they are heading us in the right direction as a comprehensive way to look at the challenges specifically in downtown. I'm very glad to hear Lieutenant Kent Carr mention that his team is thinking about how they are going to serve Whitaker more effectively in the coming months. I think that's a very crucial piece in terms of not displacing bad activities downtown to other neighborhoods, and then now we've got a new set of problems. I think it's important for us to keep faith with all of our neighborhoods in terms of public safety. And then lastly, on the sidewalk and street cleaning that was mentioned by Jeff, I hope that will be timed, take into account the times that our downtown tends to see the most litter, which I believe is early Sunday morning after the Saturday evening bar season died down. So I'm not an expert on that. So I just would hope that those resources would be put out there very strategically to really get at the core of that problem in terms of trying to keep our downtown just looking better in general. Thank you very much.
All right, Scott.
Thank you for the presentation. I found it very informative. But I have a question on the movement of officers to the downtown area or the increased presence, I should say, that you mentioned. Is that coming from the other areas, or is that overtime, a combination? And how does that impact the service profiles for maybe the outer areas of the city?
The 4 officers that we intend on adding, 2 to parks and then 2 to downtown during the 6-month operation, we've set aside overtime money for those officers for the most part.
Okay. I was really intrigued with the collaboration with the security downtown as well. I think that presence is one thing that we've heard tonight over and over, and they're definitely cheaper than having police officers there. What does a more collaborative environment look like with the security that's downtown? And the reason I ask that, I'm also on the police commission, and I asked about the call volume that they're receiving. And I've heard from business owners and folks that work downtown that have called them instead of the police for things that sometimes could be a police issue because they thought they would get there first. So how are we capturing that data? I know we're not, but could we be doing that?
So with reference to your earlier question about what would a more collaborative environment look like, so to me, what's happening now is we're working independently. You have different security firms all the way from, regardless of the name of the company, or public safety entities, Lane Community College, to the LTD and what have you, to downtown guides. Each of them is sort of independent from one another. In sort of Sam Kamkar's perfect world, what would happen is that first and foremost, we would have some value statements and some operating agreements where we collectively mutually agree about what kind of a philosophy we're going to have in terms of how we're going to solve problems together as a team versus individual units. And I'm not sure that we're doing as good a job in that right now. That's one. That's where we need to start. The second, the follow-up with that is that we need to be on the same system. same communication, and we need to share our schedules with each other. We need to know right off the bat, who's dealing with, what person or what have you, so that we're right there. We can back each other up and and synchronize our schedules so that we're not wasting resources, and really getting that dialogue going with a problem-solving mindset moving forward.
I'm glad you mentioned the communication piece. Are there any other items of equipment that might be needed? I know that the non-emergency line is pretty busy, so
yes.
Personal cell phones don't necessarily always, if I'm witnessing something, get the job done as quick as maybe a radio or something.
Yes.
Are there other pieces of equipment that might be needed in this?
Well, radios is certainly one venue, one mechanism, but there are other measures we can take. For example, we're not tapping into technology right now to be able to use our smart. Everybody has a smartphone, so that right off the bat, just like the Park Watch program that I mentioned earlier, everybody knows what's going on at the same time. And hopefully we'll get to a point, I'm really excited about having a downtown manager, if I can segue a little bit, where we can have some kind of a daily bulletin about what's happening in downtown, all the events that are going on, and so that we can be all on the same sheet of music, and we're just not there yet.
And last question, on the court, teams, what's the percentage of engagement that they have when an officer or somebody engages with somebody on the street, that it's received well and there's some dialogue established?
Anytime somebody asks me a question to assign a percentage, I don't know how to respond to that, because I don't know. What I can tell you is from what I hear from the officers and what I see, many cases when they contact somebody, they already know who that person is, but it takes time for them to establish that trust. You got to keep in mind that some of the people that they come in contact with, especially people who have either mental illness or drug addiction or what have you, there are some trust issues with them, with the police. So our officers are persistent, and it's just they keep pushing and pushing and pushing to try to establish that trust, and we've seen examples of that where they've been able to take somebody that all of us in law enforcement have dealt with for years, and now they're with their family members, and it's pretty gratifying. So,
thank you.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you very much. I've been pretty hard on you tonight, Captain. I'm that way, and that, so I'm sure that's what you expect me to do, because that's my job. But I will say this. There is a young lady who is one of the directors of RAIN, Economic Development organization in our downtown, organization leases a building from the city of Eugene downtown. Her name is Carolyn Cummings. And she has testified at council 3 times about the sexual harassment and the violent language that she's been subject to 3 different times, and what it is that we should and shouldn't expect to have to deal with in the downtown community. She's one of many, and the emails as well. My question is, have you heard her testimony that she gave at council? Any of the things she talked about in specifics?
I have heard her testimony. I've also invited her to meet my command staff, so she's been talking to us as well.
Has she described to you that she has been the victim of any kind of crime in what she has described to you?
I would prefer that we don't talk necessarily about her, because if she's talked about a crime, I don't think I'd want to mention that necessarily. But
perhaps I can make my point without pushing that hard. I believe, but I'm uneducated about such things, that in fact she has been subject to a crime of harassment per se, at the very least. I think there are many crimes that aren't just behavioral problems. They're not just, we don't like panhandling and we don't like loitering. Crimes that people are being subject to. And that's what business owners are complaining about. So they're saying we're subject to crimes that we're not responding to appropriately. So my question, is community court the answer to solve that problem? And if it is, are we suggesting sufficient budget this year in order so that we know community court will solve that problem of those crimes? And if not, for example, where I suggest perhaps we could use more officers, beds, and ADAs. When those, we have the acting director of the Chamber of Commerce sitting right in the front row, and she deals with this all the time with scores of businesses downtown. And when they come to her, when they come to me and they say, what should we be doing? Should I say the police and the folks working on downtown have this in hand and it's going to be solved? Or should, and when they say we're not responding with adequate police, should I say, well then you need to, you know, perhaps come to council and tell my colleagues to advocate for adding that to the budget? Or should I tell them, nope, community court's going to do it and we have enough to take care of it? How should I respond to those folks?
I'm going to start. I think that's an unfair question, Mike, and for a couple reasons. One is you're making the assumption, one, that our police officers are not responding to crimes, and I don't know that that's true. That's what I heard. So Sam can respond to that. So I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think what you've heard from anybody here is that community court or court is going to solve all the problems. We know that's not going to happen. We have talked previously tonight. We know the capacity in all these systems is inadequate. And so what we've asked our team to put together in consultation with others is, given where we are today, what's the best way that we feel like we can continue to move forward in a very productive, active, positive way in the downtown on multi-fronts. If we had the ability to add 100 officers in this town, we should add 100 officers to this town. If we had the ability to expand community court by tenfold, we should expand community court by tenfold. We don't have all that capacity, and so I think part of what you're hearing is what, in our collective best professional opinions, is how to best address the system over the next several months, knowing that it's not going to solve everything, so it's not a fair question, and thinking about how do we in the long term figure out how to expand capacity in all of these systems to make a larger impact as we go. So you're more than welcome to respond to anything around the
May I just, please, with my time, I'm not, that's not an indictment of the officers. I think they do a heroic job, and I think our staff does too. Don't misunderstand, but they're giving us a presentation about what we ought to do next, and I'm simply responding saying, I'm trying to deal with the cognitive dissonance between what I think the community's desire to act is and what I'm hearing staff suggesting we do, and I don't think they match very well, and I'm trying to reconcile that and asking for some help.
I guess I would just add, and this won't answer your question either, but just a reminder that what we're doing, and what this presentation was really intended is, with the one-time funds that we were given, what is something we can do right now to try to make something different this spring? It's not the long-term forever solution. We just felt like this budget committee and the council would want more operational, like we're doing this right now, we're doing this now, we're doing it tomorrow, we're doing it over the next couple of months. These are some things you can see, because we've heard a lot of people saying, what's happening, what are you doing, what are you doing, you know, and when the PPS report came back, like for example, the very first thing on the list that people said they thought of when they said downtown was dirty, and so that's part of, I mean, I understand that was just one of the words, but this is a short-term, like quick, fast solution that we're working on, and hopefully we learn a lot that we can build into the longer term.
I would ask, what do you think dirty means?
That's a good question.
Because I think it means different than staff is interpreted personally.
I think our, I understand what you're saying, Mike. I think our solution for the short term is tried to be really comprehensive of any which way you might interpret that word.
Okay. Thank you.
I put myself in the queue next. I'm just trying to think, there's a lot of ideas floating around with this presentation. I'm trying to bring it back into the budget context for myself. How does this influence our conversations? And maybe it doesn't this cycle and this year. It seems like this is already charging forward at full speed, which is great. I think there's a lot of great ideas captured in this project. I talked to a city employee recently, and she said one of the challenges and opportunities of working in the city is that people want the city to be all things for all people, and that really comes through in this work. I guess what I really want to say is reiterate what's already been said by someone else tonight is it'd be great to know, and I'm sure you're doing this, which of these strategies does have the most impact. So with a budget hat on, if you will, when you're thinking about metrics, it would be really helpful to think which of these strategies should we be looking at sustaining over the long term. I'm sure we can't sustain all of them long term, but which are really hitting our triple bottom line framework goals, and which are, another question to tie into this is, what does success look like for this project? I see some vision statements, big vision statements in this piece of paper, but just thinking about what does success look like and how does that tie into our budget conversation in the future is really important as we move forward. I want to check in. Garrett, did you want to be in the queue? I'm not hearing anything. So I have Josh and then Councilor Semple. And I also just want to point out that we're a little over time for this presentation, and we have another one following. So if your question has already been answered and maybe you have more of a comment, we could think about submitting those in another form so we can get through our agenda tonight. Josh.
Well, then I'll keep it really quick and hand it off to Councilor Semple. I really appreciate Councilor Clark's comments, and I think that's exactly where my comments about having clear metrics coming from. Of course, we should try to do something this year. I worry that we'll come back every year and we'll just be trying to do something that particular year. And we should be asking the questions now to figure out, like, what exactly are the outcomes that we're trying to get to? You know, what resources line those things up? I mean, John, this will sound, speaking of unfair, this will sound unfair, but when you were giving the hypothetical examples of if we had resources, we'd do this, we'd do that, at the top of your list was hire a bunch more officers. But we heard from Chief Kearns earlier, we're not going to arrest our way out of most of these problems. So we kind of know that there's going to be some reallocation of resources. So how do we inform that at the level of the budget process? That's all.
Councilor Semple.
Thank you, Josh. I think those are good comments. And thank you to everybody who's presented so far. It's been really informative. Good job. Thank you. I talked with city managers this afternoon, and they said this was coming. So thank you. I'm glad that we are going to do some things right away. I think that's important. I think the long-term strategy, the coordination with our police department is critical. But I'm giving up my dog. I'm glad we're getting some fun things.
Any last questions?
Thank you.
Oh, John.
Quick question, I hope, for Captain Kumar. I think Eugene has done a really outstanding job in a lot of ways to have services available, to take a good holistic approach to how they address problems. But as compared to the surrounding communities, have we actually made our lives harder? Have we increased demand on the services by having cahoots available here, or having a different approach to panhandling as compared to Springfield, or having a different approach to the camping force? Are we actually just making more work for you by having these policies?
I'm not sure how to respond to that.
Yes, no questions.
And I'm also not sure whether or not the social services that we are providing is necessarily adequate. I mean, you heard the testimony earlier that overall our criminal justice system is overloaded. and people are stuck. Are they being invited into Eugene? I don't know. They might be. With the exception of summertime, where we sort of see travelers, so-called travelers that come in, for the most part, the homeless population that I encounter, that our officers encounters, are people that are Eugenians. These are not from Boulder, Colorado, or someplace else. Is it increasing my workload? Well, perhaps it is.
And I'm not talking Colorado. I'm talking, if I'm panhandling, I'll come to this side of I-5 instead of that side. So it's not a huge distance. I'm just wondering if some of these approaches to how we do it is having effects upon, service demand.
You're assuming there's less panhandling in Springfield, which I don't think is true.
They have a different approach
It's
to
a
it.
reasonable question.
Less of it.
Not saying one's right or wrong, but our approach has a budget impact, I would suspect.
Yes, it does. I can just say that we're not Springfield.
It's true.
Jill, briefly,
Can I get back in the queue?
yes. I am a big fan of the sustainable budget and not the one-time funds. But I will tell you, I'm very glad I voted for the one-time funds with this. What I'm very impressed by is your quick action, the way you've come together and included policing, design, not only like get the bad guys, but then fill the gap, which is what I see the B program being, ping pong, human foosball, these things, when people are down having fun, it changes it. And I guess I appreciate all the comments about pushing the problems out. And again, it's obviously something that needs to be looked at so we don't fix one area and make another area worse. But overall, I think I'm just very impressed by it. And I think we've tried so many things, strong arming, being so nice. And it seems to me that this is finally just like a little glimpse of something that might work really, really well. And thank you for doing it, and thank you for all the effort you're putting into it. And what I want to know from a budget point of view too is, I don't want to put you all three on the spot, but if I could, I would. And I would say to you, if you could say the one budgetary item that you would like to have increased, what would it be? And if you want to answer it, you can. And if you'd like to just think about it and submit it later, then that would also be fine.
I don't mind answering that question,
Okay.
if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you would think that a police officer would be saying, I want to see more cops.
Not
But, certainly we could use more officers, but the one thing we could use is a downtown manager. We need somebody to help us coordinate all of these resources. And right now, you're looking at them.
The downtown manager?
So there are a number of us that are on top of our existing jobs that are trying to put this thing together and make this machine move forward. And a downtown manager would be welcomed.
Great, thank you.
Do you agree?
Yes,
I agree.
Actually, that's exactly what I was going to say too.
Wow, so unanimity right there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Counselor Surratt.
Thank you. So I just wanted to respond a little bit to the question about whether we're creating work for ourselves by providing social services. And I just recall former Mayor Tish Piercy, who would often point out that Lane County is actually the main provider of social services, so we contribute funding through the Human Services Commission, and Eugene is the county seat. So we do end up hosting more social services than other nearby communities just due to that fact. And the only thing I know that Springfield has done differently from us is they recently passed an ordinance prohibiting the handing of things of value through a car window while you are on the city street. So they have not banned panhandling. They cannot do that. It would be unconstitutional. And I think the reason we have more activity around that kind of thing in Eugene is we have more active downtown. We have more people downtown to panhandle than Springfield does. So I think we need to have some perspective as we look to other cities and how they've addressed these issues.
We're number one.
So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
All right, with that, I think we are done with this topic. We're going to take a 10-minute break, so we'll convene about 8 after. Thank you. Thank you.
Huh?
Next up, we have a presentation on emergency preparedness.
Hello.
Thank you.
I'm Myrnie Dowd, Risk Services Director, and with me is Kevin Holman, the city's Emergency Management Program Manager. And we're here to talk to you about our emergency preparedness program. We're going to give you an overview of planning, training and exercises, community outreach, our community partnerships, which are very important to us, and mitigation. Kevin is going to talk to you about the first 4 things, and I'm going to come back at the end and talk to you about what we're doing in terms of our seismic mitigation specifically, and follow up on some of the questions that you asked at your February 15th meeting. So I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Good evening. Kevin Holman, as Myrnie said, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to tell everybody what we're up to and what we're working on. So with that said, just so everybody knows, I've been kind of losing my voice today, so actually for the last 3 days, but it's improving today, so I hope it holds out. Let's just talk for a minute and just show you the 3 basic documents that we use. And there's a lot of FEMA guidance behind this, but we really look to these 3 documents to try to help guide us with our program. And so the first one is the Oregon Resilience Plan, and the mitigation effort that was done there to try to help us kind of guide our whole entire state through some of the large scale potential disasters that are looming in our area. Then we have the next document, which is the Natural Hazards Mitigation Plan. That is a joint document that we have done with the City of Springfield. And we work together on that along with a lot of other partners to get that document to where we can use it. And it has a lot of good information in it that can help us and guide us in how we deal with our mitigation efforts on natural hazards. And then the third document is our Emergency Operations Plan, and this again is a document that we've done in conjunction with the City of Springfield and work together to be collaborative in this area to try to make sure that we are able to do what we need to do along with them to be successful should we have to deal with an emergency or disaster. So with that said, let's just talk about the Eugene Springfield Multi-Jurisdictional Emergency Operations Plan. And I may refer to it as our EOP, but it's our basic plan. And it was updated in November 2016, so it's a fresh document, and it's out on our website if you're interested in looking at it. It identifies the stakeholders that we're looking for to help us not only guide us through emergencies and disasters, but also become part of the effort to recover from those disasters. So we talk in there about what citizens and community can do to help support our resiliency efforts all the way through the city and the organizations that support us, volunteers and everything. So everybody gets kind of pulled into this. And so I think it's a useful document that helps us to kind of understand the roles we all play within our organizations. Within that document, in one of the sections is a section that addresses the roles that the City Council would play and our leadership, our executive staff and so forth. And so it's pretty clear and it's a collaborative document once again with the City of Springfield. So I think it's been well vetted and will serve the purposes that we need well. It also addresses a multi-hazard approach. When we talk about our emergency operations plan, we want to make sure that it will work for lots of different kinds of potential issues, emergencies, and disasters. So it's designed to escalate or de-escalate as we need it, depending on the circumstances that we operate under. So with that said, though, our primary focus is on our mission areas, and our mission areas are in prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. So we try to cover all those areas when we address emergency planning. With that said, though, one of the unique things about this plan is that it's probably one of the few, if not the only, joint emergency operations plan combined with another city that I'm aware of. And so I thought that was really cool. And to make sure that it's understood that it's a whole community plan. It's designed around our ability to work together as a community. And so through a lot of the things we do, we try to bring the community in and make sure that we're working together and operating as a cohesive group. The next plan is our Eugene Springfield Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan. And it addresses the multiple hazards that were identified with our working group that we had that brought together many of the stakeholders from around the city and the county to try to look at the hazards that exist in our area. So it doesn't address all natural hazards, but it addresses the ones that we felt were the most prevalent for what we had to deal with and had the most risk for. So within that, we have 11 community sectors that we talked about. So they're like electrical sectors and stormwater, the fuel management, all those kinds of things that we deal with in order to make sure that we're actually able to resiliently or respond to and recover from those kinds of emergencies or disasters that we may include. So some of those are like healthcare and public health, electrical, transportation, food, housing, communications, and those sectors. It also identifies mitigation actions. And when we talk about mitigations, things that we can maybe do ahead of time to try to prevent some things from happening. And so it's a pretty extensive list, and there's a lot to do there, and there's a lot of work to be done. This plan was approved by FEMA in 2015. It's a joint plan with the state's plan, and it feeds up into that system through the state via the county, and also then becomes part of the FEMA's assessment on our natural hazard mitigation plan. So it ties into a lot of things we do around the city, but it has heavy weight within the emergency management realm where we work. So right now we're looking at doing a new update to the plan, and we anticipate that we'll have that prepared and ready to be approved again in 2019. So let's talk about the Oregon Resiliency Plan just a little bit, or the Oregon Resilience Plan. And it's really about Cascadia and the Cascadia fault line, the subduction zone, if you will. And the Oregon Seismic Safety Policy Advisory Commission was tasked with 3 basic objectives. And they were, one, to identify the impacts of a 9.0 earthquake on that subduction zone and what that would do to Oregon, and then establish a time frame to restore critical functions for like electricity, our hospitals, our roads, our infrastructure, and what that would look like, and then recommend the changes and the practices and the policies that we could do to protect lives and commerce. So this plan is important because it has a lot to do with how we are trying to address the issues in the city and surrounding areas along with our partners. And Myrnie's going to talk a lot more about that when she gets to the mitigation piece, where we'll dig into more of what that's all about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the grants that we've written lately. Some of these have gone through. The first one it's our Emergency Management Performance Grant. We've been participating in this for several years. This is a grant that we use to drive some of the money demands or the budget issues surrounding emergency management. It pays for salaries and things like that, and it also helps us if we have money left over to buy some needed like resources and other equipment. So that's a big piece of what we do, and we have that grant. It's been ongoing now for several years. It is going down. It's not as big as it used to be. In fact, I believe it was about double that at one point in time, not too long ago. And then we also have the next grant, which is a state Homeland Security grant, which we applied for this year. We applied for 3 pieces of that grant. And the first one was for the FBI Explosives Team Grant for $261,000. That's basically, that grant supplies the resources and the equipment needs to the explosive teams that respond throughout the state of Oregon. So it's very regional in its implementation and how it's used. The next two grants, like the satellite uplink grant, was one that we've applied for because we are concerned about the ability to make sure that we've got connections with the internet and be able to talk to the state. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to push forward and get that in position so that our Emergency Operations Center will have the capabilities it needs to be functional immediately after a disaster or any kind of an emergency that could take out that capability. So we have the Fuels Assessment Planning Grant, which is another grant that has to do a lot with mitigation and our hazard mitigation plan, but it has also to do with our ability to stay in service for police, fire, public works, and continue to be able to respond during like a Cascadia type event. So we really are excited about hopefully getting that grant so that we can actually dig into some of the needed components of what we're looking at, because we really don't quite know all the issues surrounding that. So we hope to use that grant to get some a contractor to help us really analyze what it is the city needs and look at our short-term needs for fuel management in the event we have a Cascadia type event. We also put in for some fire station grants, which are pretty excited to do, and they were in Bethel and Danabo and up in the university area. We put in for quite a bit of money for these, and we're hoping that they'll play out. Some of the the nice thing was that we'd done some of the mitigation efforts, and Myrnie will get into that, in advance of this grant, not knowing that we were going to have this capability, and so it played really nicely into our planning and what we'd had the opportunity to do around our hazard mitigation plan. So with that, let's just go ahead and move into the training and exercise piece. And I think it probably goes without saying, but training and exercise is critical to what we do. And we've been successful at pushing training out across the city. As I sit here tonight, I think about the people that are sitting behind me, and many of them have been participants in our training. And I'm quite excited about that, as well as John and Sarah. And so I really, excuse me, yes, anyway. So anyway, I'm excited about that because we've had the great opportunity to actually push out our training to a lot of different pieces of the community, of our organization, and we've given them specialized training so that they can actually do the nuts and bolts of the things that we have put in place, and so the specific training and how we're going to operate during a disaster or an emergency. But we've also pushed out a lot of FEMA training, which is the higher level, just above that, that can help us to really be prepared and understand why it is what we're doing. So I appreciate everybody's involvement there, and that's been a nice thing, having just come to the city not too long ago. So with the Cascadia peril, we have a training and exercising, and we did a large catastrophic FEMA coordinated regional exercise last year in June. It was a 4-day exercise. We had the opportunity to work together as a group and use the training that we had worked on. We were one of 3 Oregon cities that really participated and did the full exercise, which was, I think, a feather in our cap. But it was also a good time for us to really get a clear picture of what it was we were capable of doing at that time. And so we've taken a lot of the information from that, and we're now revisiting the planning that had been done prior to that to try to make sure that we fix some of the errors and things that we weren't able to do as well as we'd like to have. So that's a big piece of what exercising is all about for us, and it's the testing that coordination between not only us and our partners all the way through the state and the federal government. So that was exciting. It took about 18 months to prepare for that, and it was a pretty heavy lift, but we were able to perform well under the circumstances as far as getting the exercise put together and being able to put on a professional exercise that really was helpful in our ability in helping us to understand what it is we need to do and how we need to proceed. So there was about 90 employees involved in that, which I thought was pretty interesting, because we had a lot of very interested, and not only that, committed employees that came and participated in that exercise, and they should be commended for that, I think. So with that said, we also get involved with other departments and do things with them to help support their mission. We worked a lot this spring with the U of O on the Olympic track and field trials. We helped present and do a lot of the planning, as well as help staff some of their emergency operations center activities, and we worked with the command post as well. And so we integrated with our police and fire, and at the command post level, as well as at the emergency operations center. So that is all good, not only real world activities, but it's also good practice for more catastrophic type events that could occur. So we also did the ice storm in 2016, which resulted in a FEMA declaration, which we're working on. And that was a very busy time for everybody, and that was, I'm told, that was one of the few times we've ever opened up our emergency operations center. And so that was interesting, and with support of the execs and everything to make that happen. That was a great opportunity to get in and really hopefully get some reimbursement back for some of the issues that occurred around that ice storm. We also worked with police on the inauguration 2017 that we worked on. There we filled some of the planning positions, and we also helped to support and mentor how that planning process works for the personnel and the staff. And so with the chief's support and help, it was good to get together and really augment and support those operations. Once again, all this helps us be better prepared for larger events that could occur. And also the 2021 World Track and Field Championships are coming up, and so this is once again a good way for us to practice and be better prepared should we have issues there. So I feel like we're doing a lot of things in that area that's very proactive. Anything we do, though, along with our emergency plan, has to do with community outreach. And when we talk about community outreach, it's really what it is that we do, and a big piece of that is our CERT program. But with CERT comes a lot of other programs that we do. We put under that umbrella of community outreach. And so just a little diagram here of what we do. We have our CERT basic training twice a year, where we actually bring CERT members in and they learn fire safety, light search and rescue, some medical capabilities and their organization on how they can get together and support their neighborhoods. And so that's part of what we do, and then we do specific training with those CERT individuals on an ongoing basis to try to help them and augment what we're trying to prepare them for. Our focus with CERT is really around trying to help them to support themselves and their neighborhoods. So take care of themselves, their families, and their neighborhoods first. And that's what we want them to do, but we also want them to give us information back so that we can know what it is they need out in our community, because we know that in a larger scale disaster emergencies, we may not actually have that information. And so we knew that during the ice storm, and so we asked the CERT to feed information back to us. Our community education is just a little bit different from CERT, because this is where a neighborhood or an association or just a religious group could call us, somebody like that comes together for another reason but is concerned about emergency response and what they can do to protect themselves and their families. This is the community education piece, and we do quite a bit of that. We reach a lot of people this way, and hopefully that we're able to convince them that there's a piece of this emergency operations plan that requires them to be part of the solution to the problem. And so we try to present that as much as we can. We get calls. I got calls probably 2 or 3 times a week, people wanting some measure of support in this area. got a call today where they just wanted a preparedness table and some literature to put on it, so that as people left the room, they could pick that up and take that with them. So we do quite a bit in this area. There's potentially more to be done, but we're trying as best we can to get the word out that a big piece of our resiliency effort lies with the community in general of being prepared at home and ready to take on that piece of the response, because we know we won't have the capacity to do that for probably up to 2 weeks. And so that's a big piece of what we do. We have community partnerships. We work with a lot of different organizations around the city of Eugene and in the county. We have good relationships with these groups, and we work very closely with Lane Preparedness Coalition and eWeb. I was in a meeting with eWeb this afternoon. Lane County, of course, is our direct link to the state, and we'll be meeting tomorrow to talk about some of our issues with our local hazard mitigation pieces. Springfield, I work with Springfield often. I've probably met with Springfield 2 or 3 times this week on several issues, just to try to make sure we're coordinated and see if we're actually addressing the issues that we need to. The Red Cross has always been, as long as I've been here, has always been a very proactive group and comfortable with what they're doing. Food for Lane County and Peace Health. Right now with Peace Health and Mackenzie Willamette, we're doing an exercise. Actually, FIRE's doing it, but we're supporting that exercise with those 2 hospitals. And the Oregon Partnership for Disaster Resilience, we work heavily with them, and Myrnie might bring some of that into her presentation as well today. And then the Lane Transit District, I had an opportunity to go out and visit with them just the other day, and that was a great opportunity, and they're very on board to help and support what we're doing. And so our community organizations active in disasters, we leaned on them heavily during the ice storm. And they did a stellar job. Very impressed with the organization they have. Karen down there, she's got this, and so that was a great opportunity to work with them. And so I can't say enough to these groups, about these groups, because they're really there to help us and support us.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. We're at time for scheduled any time for our meeting, so I'd entertain a motion to extend so they could finish our presentation.
Motion to extend 15 minutes.
Second. Great. All in favor, raise your hand. Great. Looks like all are in favor. Any opposed?
I don't know what's the appropriate moment to comment. At least according to the schedule, we're more than half an hour behind. So I just want to make sure that we don't shortchange discussion or your presentation or both, or unless we do it deliberately. That's all.
So the motion passed, so we'll extend 15 minutes. If there's an opportunity to summarize, that'd be great. So we have more time for discussion. I'll let you proceed. Okay.
So with that said, I turn the time back to Myrnie and talk about mitigation.
Got 2 minutes, Myrnie.
Okay, well, moving right along. My comments are going to be specific to the Cascadia, what we call the Cascadia Peril, because that's shorter than the Cascadia Subduction Zone earthquake. And these statistics are from the Oregon Resilience Plan. You may have seen them already. This was basically the gap analysis that surprised a lot of people. This is specific to the Willamette Valley, how long we are likely to be without these critical services in our area after that earthquake. And most of us looked at that list, and the state looked at the list and said, that's really not acceptable, right? We have an earthquake, you can't wait 18 months for the hospital to open. So the plan then, 341 pages, but there is an executive summary that's very accessible. They made key recommendations that we are following or trying to implement through our natural hazard mitigation plan. And number one, and we all really need to be aware of this because we don't know when the earthquake will come. It can come any time. But given our history of not knowing that we had the significant seismic risk, we have a lot of work to do that will take a long time to do it all. So this plan tells us to plan for a 50-year time horizon to accomplish all these goals. Wow. The establish a state resilience office. We now do have a state resilience officer who hopefully will be able to lead these efforts across the state and keep us all focused and moving forward, and hopefully advocate at the legislature for funding. And then conduct comprehensive seismic assessments and do the needed capital investment in seismic upgrades, specifically for public structures, and then develop incentives for the private sector. That goes back to Kevin's whole community approach. We really need all parts of the community invested in seismic resilience, and then to update all sorts of policies that can help promote seismic resilience. Now, specifically, the City of Eugene's Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan does include specific work plan items around seismic evaluations, and we are ahead of schedule that we laid out in the plan, which gave us a 5-year horizon to do the seismic evaluations, and we've already completed, as Mark Schoening, city engineer, told you on February 15th, we've completed seismic analysis of 31 critical bridges and have the list of 15 that need to be upgraded and the approximate cost. Public Works has already done seismic evaluation of city-owned wastewater infrastructure, and you have one wastewater pump station in the capital improvement program for 2018 to 2023. MWMC has their own capital program, and they are renovating their operations facilities, our administration building and operations at the wastewater treatment plant, and they have taken the seismic standards into account for their upgrades. And then we've done the first step of analysis of 40 critical city-owned buildings. I am the lead in risk, working in partnership with Meredith Swenson, who's here tonight, our project manager in facilities. And we hired a contractor, structural engineer, Holbach Lewin, to do analysis of these 40 facilities, which has been completed. So we now are prioritizing those. I'm still talking, I'll stay here. We're prioritizing those buildings, and our top priority is our public safety facilities. There is an assumption that, for example, fire stations they're built to essential service standards, so there's an assumption that after the 9.0 earthquake, they'll still be there and be operational. Our fire stations were built over a period of time from 1949 to 2005, and the building code on earthquake seismic standards has changed, by my layperson's readings, approximately 11 times since between 1974 and 2005. The standards keep getting more rigorous as the building officials have a better understanding of the risk. They're now using USGS seismic data to inform the building code. So therefore, our fire stations, police headquarters, and other actually non-essential facilities that we anticipate using in response to the earthquake were all evaluated by Holbach Lewin, and we have recommendations for seismic upgrades. And as Kevin showed you earlier, we have 3 fire stations that need significant seismic upgrades. The total of those 3 grants is around $750,000. and they were just the top layer. So we have a lot of work to do. The next phase in the project is having Holbach Lewin do more work on cost analysis. So we have their assessments of how our buildings will perform. We don't have any cost estimates on what it would take to retrofit the buildings. So that's what we'll be working on over the next long while, I'm sure. So in summary, what Kevin and I are hoping to communicate to you all is that we do have long-term vision and commitment to emergency preparedness across all phases of emergency preparedness for this community. We're actively working multiple strategies, planning, response, training, leveraging our community partnerships, which have been wonderful. And then specifically regarding seismic resilience, we are following very closely the recommendations laid out in the Oregon Resilience Plan. So we have a lot of information on our website. Our Emergency Operations Basic Plan is on the City of Eugene Emergency Management website, so it's available to the whole community and the whole internet. The Natural Hazard Mitigations Plan is out there, and it really is a wonderful document with a lot of great information and maps detailing the various natural hazards that confront our community. The Oregon Resilience Plan we have linked to, and then there is basic information just on how to build an emergency kit and basic emergency preparedness information, plus information on becoming a community emergency response team member. And we, as Kevin said, we do usually 2 to 3 trainings every year and do them often jointly with City of Springfield. So with that, I will take questions.
Councilor Zelenka?
How does one get in the queue to be the CERT training?
You call emergency management phone number and just ask to be put on the list to sign up for the next training, and you can also do it on the internet. That's what there will be a link if you go to the CERT page, and they have a Facebook page as well. And that program is managed by Patience Winningham, one of Kevin's staffers.
And what's the phone number? Your phone number? That you never call?
Yeah, 6884, I believe.
541-682-6884.
884.
One thing about that, though, is if you want to sign up for it, I would suggest that you monitor that, because we pull from the list, we put out a notification, we don't keep the roster and we just take first come, first serve on the notification. So if you'd like to do that.
And our classes have been full. I've been told that the next class we're going to have this spring is the largest one we've ever had.
How many people is that?
There's a lot of interest.
82.
Great. Josh?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I spent a lot of time thinking about a Cascadia event and what it would mean, and have spent a lot of time talking to people in the community about it. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. It's incredibly important for people watching at home and people in the room. I would say if you have not seen the OPB documentary Unprepared, that's actually the title, I recommend it. And if you're suffering from insomnia, the Oregon Resilience Plan that you mentioned is excellent as another resource with a lot more detail. I have a whole bunch of questions, and I don't want this to sound critical, but I see a tremendous number of gaps, either in the work as it was presented or in aggregate what we've seen from the city so far on this issue. So I'll start with a bunch of them. First of all, I hear about the seismic evaluation that you're starting into, or that you've done. You had a consultant do, and that you're picking away at now with the fire stations. I would ask that be represented fully in the unfunded needs assessment. We don't yet have this, but sort of the successor to the multi-year financial plan. I think we really need to be able to share with the community the magnitude of the cost that we're facing to upgrade these facilities. Related to those facilities, I'm curious, has council discussed a policy about seismic standards for new buildings? We had what I consider to be a totally insufficient community discussion about City Hall last year. We shouldn't, in my opinion, be thinking about any buildings that are not operational in the event of certainly public buildings in the event of a Cascadia quake. So I'm just curious if that has been a discussion topic at council and what you guys can do to inform that. I am also curious about the community outreach. I deeply appreciate the community outreach that you're doing and that you're seeing that interest. I am concerned about these numbers as a measure because participants doesn't quite do it. I guess I'm wondering, do we have measurements of follow-through on these participant numbers in terms of the preparedness activities that people subsequently engage in? Do people, do we know the percentage of households with sufficient food and water for 3 days or for a week or for 2 weeks? Do we know the number of people who have earthquake insurance for their homes? Do we have a sense of, whether people have a plan? There are tremendous resources out there. I appreciate that you guys are guiding people through a lot of this, but that's not really the problem. People are a Google search away from figuring out how to get ready, and yet they're not ready en masse, is what we sort of hear on the street. So I feel like we have to figure out where can we put resources. We're at the Budget Committee. Where can we put resources to really drive awareness and then follow on activities? Practically every person I know read the article in the New Yorker in 2015, has seen or read some other materials about this, and has done almost nothing. So we need to have really clear metrics about where we put resources to actually get people active on these topics. I'll leave it there for now.
Do you want to respond to that?
I'll respond to your first comment about the unfunded needs assessments. We can definitely put our seismic mitigation needs on the unfunded needs assessment once we have it established. But as I said, we've completed the seismic analysis of the 40 buildings, but we've only done the cost estimates of the retrofit for the 3 fire stations to meet the grant deadline. So phase 2 of the project is to do the cost analysis, have those engineers do the cost analysis for the other priority buildings.
And I would just say quickly, the MYFP, I assume the UNA will be the same, but the MYFP had a lot of just rough sense of scale estimates. Even if it's that level of estimate, I think that could serve an important purpose for council and the community and the Budget Committee.
And I can answer your last question. I imagine that you anticipate the answer is that we don't have statistics on follow through for our community education activities. We do work very closely with some neighborhood groups, and so we have a sense of engagement in some areas with some neighborhood groups like the South Eugene neighbors, the Friendly Street neighbors, but for a citywide metric, no, we don't have that, and appreciate your comments.
So we are at our extended time. I'd entertain another motion to extend the conversation.
Parking lot going to be locked, Chelsea?
We can get out.
Okay, just checking.
They did that once.
Move to extend the meeting another 15 minutes.
Is there a second? Okay, I've never been in this position before, so what's the protocol when we don't extend?
Does it die?
Move to extend the meeting another 13 minutes?
If you don't extend it, you don't extend it, and then you're
If you don't extend it, the meeting.
So I have a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, this is going to say something, but it's not
There he
that
goes.
important.
She's fine.
We need the city attorney for this.
She's fine.
Yeah.
You're doing just right. Yeah, if
Okay,
you
so
don't
I have a
have
motion
it,
to adjourn. Do we have to, or we just adjourn?
yeah. You can just adjourn
Okay.
it as the chair.
So with that, thank you so much for your presentations. I do want to make a quick announcement. The next Budget Committee meeting is April 26th, and City Manager will present the proposed budget at that time. So we'll see you then. Thank you to everyone. Adjourned.
They're at that point already.